Welcome back. Election night in America continue. What a dramatic night indeed, and the stakes are clearly enormous. Take a look at this. In the Georgia two Senate runoff elections, 98% of the estimated vote is now in. The Democrat, Raphael Warnock, is leading the Republican, Kelly Loeffler, by 35,132 votes. He has 50.4% to her 49.6%. 35,000 vote lead for Warnock. The other contest, the Republican David Perdue has a very slight lead over the Democrat John Ossoff, 1,888 votes, 50%, 50%. It is so close, this contest right now. Take a look at virtual tie right now, but there's still plenty of votes outstanding, especially in some of those heavily Democratic counties around Atlanta. Take a look at what's at stake right now. Right now, the Republicans have 50 senators. The Democrats have 48 in the Democratic caucus, 2 independents who caucus with the Democrats. If the Democrats were to win, and it certainly is possible based on the numbers we're getting right now, if the Democrats were to win both of these Senate races in Georgia, it would be 50-50, but the new administration, the Biden administration, would have Kamala Harris, the vice president, who is automatically the president of the Senate. And she would break any ties, so the Democrats would be the majority in the Senate. Pamela Brown, let's take a look at where the outstanding vote is right now. 98%, we believe, of the estimated vote is in, but 2% is significant.
That's right. The outstanding vote can tell us a lot, right? And Gabriel Sterling, the Georgia election official there, says, quote, "What we have outstanding will likely be leaning Democrat at best." Those are direct words from him. And here's what he broke down. This was in the last half hour. He said that they are expecting about 27,000 early votes to be counted statewide. And he honed in on DeKalb County specifically. There's around 19,000 early in-person votes yet to be uploaded there in DeKalb, 7,000 from Coffee County, and then you have a smattering of small county handfuls that we are waiting on. Also, the day of absentee ballots have yet to be uploaded. Those are absentee ballots that just arrived in the mail today. But another factor in all of this, as you look at the margins in these tight races, is the 17,000 outstanding overseas ballots that are due on Friday. So they have an extended deadline. That could also factor into all of this, depending on how many arrive then in terms of how this race shakes out.
It's so dramatic right now that we're watching a virtual tie in one contest, the Democrat leading in the other contest by, 35,000 votes. Jake, we thought it would be dramatic, but it's a lot more dramatic than I thought it would be.
Indeed, Wolf. Indeed, the races remain very tight right now. And while we do not know the final result, I think it's fair to say, Abby, that Donald Trump, perhaps inadvertently, has worked against the interests of his own party in the fact that these races should not be so close. He lost Georgia in November because he alienated so many of the moderate voters, not to mention all the things that Biden did right. And now the Republicans are struggling in this race, not to mention the things that Ossoff and Warnock did right, partly because the president, the outgoing president, seems to have really depressed Republican turnout. I keep hearing from Republicans who talk about how turnout was light in areas of the state that they needed it to be much, much higher. Trump supporters not coming to the polls because he's been trashing the polls. He's been trashing the election process.
And he's been so distracted in the moments that he has come down to Georgia to try to turn out voters and preoccupied with himself and not preoccupied with these races. And so it should not be a surprise then that you would find that a lot of Georgia voters didn't get a clear message from President Trump about what they were supposed to do today, whether they were supposed to come out at all. And you're seeing Democrats did have a clear message. Black turnout was where Democrats needed it to be. Turnout in these Atlanta suburban counties was where they needed it to be. And on the Republican side, it's not where it was even a few months ago in November. So that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. But as we're waiting for these votes to be counted, we should just point out we're not quite there yet. But it tells you a lot that President Trump and his allies are already trying to claim that something nefarious is happening here tonight. Because they know that this is heading in a direction that's not favorable to them. They're already trying to create conspiracy theories about it. And we've been really transparent with our viewers tonight about what's been going on county by county. We know what we're waiting on. And we've been explaining it to people as it's been coming in. But the president and his allies are still out there spinning lies. And it's because they have not been willing to accept loss, not just the president's loss, but if these 2 seats don't go their way, I don't expect them to accept that either.
Oh, no. I mean, not a chance. Not a chance will they accept it. But reality is going to be what it is. And as we're watching these returns, I'm thinking about the fact that this, this day, this runoff reminds me of 2018. It sort of feels a lot more like 2018 right now than 2020 even, because in November, not that long ago, Democrats in the Senate and certainly even more so in the House, they didn't do very well, and they got hurt in a lot of places, including suburbs. Well, even Republicans now are saying, Josh Holmes, who's one of Mitch McConnell's longtime top advisors, just tweeted, well, imagine what happens when, 4 years ago, you talk about jobs in the economy, and now, 4 years later, Republicans are talking about conspiracy theories and QAnon, and they have a president who is, railing against the integrity of an election, falsely doing that. This is what happens, particularly in the suburbs.
And speaking of conspiracy theories, tomorrow we're going to hear a lot more conspiracy theories because the Electoral College votes come to Congress for certification, and a lot of Republican members of the House and Senate, standing on the sand of conspiracy theories, are going to object to President-elect Biden's win, allying themselves with the complete nuttery that we're hearing from the far, far reaches of the fever swamps. I wonder if any of them will take a lesson from what we're seeing here on the board. Even if Perdue and Loeffler pull this off, it should not be this close. This is Georgia.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why it is this close, if not headed for Democratic victories 1 or 2, is because of this deranged, self-centered, conspiracy theory spewing president in terms of what his message has been over the last few weeks. And all these Republicans are allying themselves with that deranged message. Are they going to learn anything from it? Are they going to back off?
Well, speaking of Mitch McConnell, he humored this for far longer than he should have humored it. And the rationale that you would hear from many Republicans was that the gamble was keep the energy up, keep the enthusiasm up among the base so that by today, the Republican base would come home and be there for them. But I think that we have to look at what has actually happened. McConnell has a serious situation on his hands tomorrow. He has failed to stop many senators from doing the president's bidding. The president is now even deeper into his hole of conspiracy theories than he was before, and the Republican base is now firmly entrenched in those same conspiracy theories. Was it worth it?
Yeah.
Was it worth the weeks of humoring President Trump?
Let's go to Jeff Zeleny, who covers the Biden transition for us in Wilmington, Delaware. Jeff, what are you learning? What are the Biden people seeing when they look at this? We have not called either race. Who knows what's going to happen? It could go either way. But it does look like things are trending in the Democratic direction. And this is obviously a state that Joe Biden won in November.
It is, Jake, and they are watching these numbers come in very carefully, and their silence is very calculated. They are not saying anything this evening, I'm told. I'm told that President-elect Biden has been watching these results all night. He's not expected to make a statement of any kind until the races have been called. But, boy, 2 months from tomorrow is the date at which he accepted victory right here in Wilmington. And this will be as dramatic of a moment for him in terms of how it will affect his presidency if Democrats win those seats. But we're not there yet. One thing that they do believe is the Biden map is something that they believe can form a direction for the the Democratic Party. For all the internal fights that have been going on inside the Democratic Party that you've all been talking about, that we've seen happen in races across the country last year, this is something that both of these candidates hewed very carefully to Joe Biden. And they are performing very strongly tonight in Georgia. Of course, he was there campaigning just yesterday on Monday. He was there about a month or so ago, and there was no dispute about who they were going to follow. So they were following Joe Biden. So they believe that the Biden advisors I'm talking to this evening believe that this is a roadmap for the Democratic Party. But something else is going on here, Jake. If Democrats win those seats and if Democrats control the Senate, that changes the remaining cabinet positions, including Attorney General. So look for the Biden team to potentially have a different nominee for Attorney General if Democrats are in control of the Senate. And I'm told that could be Sally Yates, who is, of course, the former acting Attorney General. She would have had a hard time getting confirmed in a Republican Senate. So if Democrats control the Senate, that is something that could also change. So tomorrow, yes, a big day in Washington, but also a very big day for Joe Biden right here in Wilmington. Jake.
Interesting. And let's talk about that for a second, because if it is true, Dana, that if, let's just say for the sake of argument, again, we're not calling either race right now, but if it ends up being a 50-50 Senate, if Democrats win both seats tonight, and then Vice President Kamala Harris would become the tie-breaking vote, then Joe Biden really probably doesn't have to worry about any of his cabinet nominees. I mean, who knows what might emerge in the vetting process, but I mean, right now, the one that Republicans have objected to the most is his nominee for Office of Management and Budget, Neera Tanden, and because she has written some mean tweets about various Republicans, and all of a sudden, they have seen the tweet and they're offended.
They've woken up to the notion of mean tweets.
Yeah, 5 years later, their sense of outrage has returned. Neera Tanden can get 50 Democratic votes if there are 50 Democratic votes, I would think.
And maybe even some Republican votes. I mean, that's your point, I know, because for all of the talk during the Democratic primary about abolishing the filibuster, we should remember there is no filibuster anymore. Harry Reid, when he was majority leader, already got rid of the filibuster for nominees.
For cabinet positions.
For cabinet officials and judicial nominees.
Right, just not the Supreme Court.
Right. So the issue is that it probably won't be an issue. You're exactly right. There's so many other questions that will come to mind when you're talking about organizing. Also, I mean, I am old enough to remember the last time, if this happens, there was a 50-50 Senate, and it took a lot of time and a lot of working together, working across the aisle to figure out how to organize an evenly divided Senate, even though obviously it was
during the Bush years,
It was
right?
during the Bush years, so the Republicans were technically in charge.
Or Dash a Lot?
And Lot. It was the Republicans were technically in charge because they had the presidency of the Senate. But it's still very, very difficult, and it requires a lot of comity with a T, and that is not something that we are in excess of right now in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, but the idea that Biden's thinking about especially the AG nomination could be changing as a result of this is, I think, very fascinating, because that's one of the, it's been one of the more opaque decisions that he has yet to make about what is he trying to accomplish, what balance is he trying to strike in choosing someone for that position. And we know that he's being pushed in one direction or another by Democrats who want, an African American in that position, others who want someone with a strong civil rights background, others who want perhaps to put someone who might be willing to enforce what Democrats view as lawlessness that might have been going on in the Trump years. So I think we will learn a lot about if these two Senate seats go to the Democrats, and we will learn a lot about what Biden's potential wish list really is, because it might give him a little bit more leeway to pick someone who who is not as soft of a nominee, who's not sort of someone who's a compromise pick, because he doesn't have to necessarily do that anymore. And I think that's one of the interesting things about what Jeff just reported. He's been waiting for a long time under a lot of pressure, and it might have been worth it if these 2 Senate seats go their way.
Very interesting. Of course, we're not done yet with this chapter. We don't know what twists and turns might await. So many have happened already. We are expecting Democrat Raphael Warnock to speak soon. He is now pulled ahead of Republican Kelly Loeffler as these votes continue to be counted. We'll be back in a moment.
All right, we got another key race alert right now. Look at this. In the Georgia Senate runoff elections, Raphael Warnock, the Democrat, he is leading the Republican Kelly Loeffler by 35,802 votes, 50.4% to 49.6%. 97% of the estimated vote is in. The Democrat is winning in this Senate runoff election. The other one, the Republican is ahead, but look, it is so close. David Perdue, the Republican, his lead has now shrunk to only 1,208 votes over the Democrat, John Ossoff. It's a virtual tie in this other Senate runoff election right now. Once again, 97% of the estimated vote is in. I'm walking over to John King at the magic wall. And what's encouraging so many of the Democrats, I've been getting emails and all sorts of communications, texts from a lot of leading Democrats. They're pretty upbeat because so much of the remaining outstanding vote is in heavily Democratic counties.
And I can back that up with discouraging text messages from Republicans during the last few minutes while I've been off the air texting them saying, do you see any way here? And they say, well, let's hang on and watch the Perdue race. But they're even worried, very much worried about that one, to your point, because of what is out. So let's look at the map. David Perdue, the Republican, he's ahead, as Wolf just noted, by 1,200 votes, but it was higher than that just a few minutes ago. We're seeing as the trend comes in. 1,200 vote lead for the Republican there. This is stunning. 35,000, nearly 36,000 vote for the Democrat Raphael Warnock in the other race. Outside at the moment, outside of the automatic recount margin there, we'll see 97% reporting statewide. And so let's put up the race where David Perdue is ahead right now and look at it through this perspective. The question is, what is still out there? What is still out there to be counted? So if you're a Republican, you're looking around, where might we get votes? Well, here's one place. Coffee County, but look at the size of it. 47th out of the 159, so not in the bottom tier, but still not huge. You see David Perdue winning quite comfortably. There are several thousand votes still to be counted here, maybe as many as 7,000 votes. So yes, there will be a net gain for both Republican candidates out of Coffee County. They can look at that. But that's the only place on the map, Wolf, I can find where you're looking at a significant number of Republican votes still to come in. Most of what else is missing is right in here. So you go to Fulton County. That's Atlanta. Up to 95%, by far the largest county in the state, 10% of the statewide population. There are 20 to 25,000 votes still to be counted in Fulton County. The Democrats are getting 72% for John Ossoff when you round up, 73% for Raphael Warnock if you round up. 20,000 to 25,000 votes still to be counted. Democrats getting 7 out of 10. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. A net gain coming for the Democrats there. There are still 19,000 votes, ballpark, to be counted in DeKalb County. You see Atlanta. The city of Atlanta runs across the county line right here as well. This is Democratic area down here. It's a little bit more floats as you go, but look, Democrats getting 83% there. Democrat getting just below 83%. It's 83% if you round it up. 19,000 votes still to be counted. We saw what happened earlier when that big basket of votes came in from DeKalb County. Democrats are quite confident they will get a significant net gain in the ballpark of 8 of 10 of those votes still to be counted, 19,000 of them still out. Then you come over here to Gwinnett County, not as Democratic, but still 60% for the Democrats, 60% for John Ossoff, 60% for Raphael Warnock. There are about 4,800 votes still out in Gwinnett County. Doesn't guarantee they come in 60-40 in favor of the Democrats, but the Democrats assume they will at least break even, most likely get something in that ballpark and a net gain. That, and just one more to look at. Again, that a lot of votes. Fulton, DeKalb, Gwinnett in the Atlanta, in the metropolitan Atlanta area, 3,000 votes down here in Chatham County, where again, Warnock's getting 59%, Ossoff's getting 59%. Net gain, if you break it down, if it comes in just like that, it's a net gain of about 600 votes for each of the Democrats there. So when you go county by county about what's missing, Republicans don't have places where they can count on giant numbers of votes. Significant number perhaps there in Coffee County, but it's just overwhelming. The math, the numbers of the outstanding vote are overwhelming, Wolf, which gets back to your point. Yes, David Perdue is up by 1,200 at the moment, but most Republicans think perhaps any minute now that is likely to change. This one's going to be very close. This one is going to be very close. We might be counting here for a couple of days, and the ballots, the overseas and military ballots to come in on Friday, could have an impact here, although most Democrats think when the rest of this comes in that Ossoff will be ahead, and ahead actually by a decent, healthy margin, and most Democrats believe that's going to grow. That's going to grow. Raphael Warnock, the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, 35,800 votes ahead now. That lead likely to grow because, again, most of what is left to be counted is here. There's some here, and where there are Republican outstanding votes, places just not as many people live there, so the Republican net won't be as much. We're down to math, simple math right now, waiting on those votes.
Warnock's lead, I'm told, is outside the margin that would be available for a potential recount.
Right, it's 0.5. It's 0.5, and so you see right there, he's at what, 0.4, 0.4. He's at 0.8 up ahead there. So it's not right there. It doesn't mean, you know, people can't ask for things. Your candidates can certainly ask. We saw in the context, just to go back at this, because the President of the United States right now is already tweeting that there's something nefarious going on in Georgia. No, there's not. We have no evidence of that. 3 times these votes were recounted. Joe Biden won Georgia. They know what they're doing, and they faced a lot of pressure from the Republican president as we watch this play out. Again, the 1,208 lead for David Perdue. If you're a Republican, you're glad to be ahead, but you know there are more than 50,000 votes to be counted in that blue circle right there.
What's going on in Georgia right now is a free and fair Democratic election. We're standing by to hear from Democratic Senate candidate Raphael Warnock. He's expected to speak at any moment now. We'll have live coverage. Our election coverage will continue with Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. They're standing by live.
We're living history once again.
Here we are.
Pleasure to be with you, D. Lemon. Here we are. Literally a nail-biter of an election in the state of Georgia. It was expected to be close. It's even closer than expected. Everybody's watching, especially President-elect Joe Biden. He probably has the most on the line tonight. We'll talk about that. So the outcome will determine, obviously, whether Republicans maintain control of the U.S. Senate or whether Democrats do, right? That's why President-elect Joe Biden is thinking about what this will mean for him when he prepares to take the oath of office in 2 weeks. It's great to have you.
Yeah, and you can better believe the current president of the United States, not just the president-elect, watching as well, because I think his reputation, right, his legacy on the line. He went down to Georgia to campaign for the 2 Republican candidates, and also he had some grievance in there as well. But welcome back to CNN's coverage of Election Night in America. It's continued right now. I'm Don Lemon, along with Mr. Christopher Cuomo, and tonight, America is really witnessing democracy in action right now in an election season when President Trump has tried and just to subvert justice, right?
Yep.
To undermine our democracy. And here we are. Chris, let's think about this. Here we are, midnight 30, a little bit past.
Midnight train to Georgia.
Midnight train to Georgia. And we're talking about Georgia, usually ruby red, and on the precipice of possibly turning blue and changing the Senate and changing really at least the beginning of the course of the Biden presidency. Who would have thunk that this would have happened in a state like Georgia?
It is unusual. It is a sign of the times. The Republicans now hoping that this is not the night that the lights went out in Georgia. Those are 2 song
You're
references.
full of them today.
That's
right?
it. I'm done. Berman was going to give you that one now. Now he's going to have to think of something else. So I'll tell you who won tonight. We already know. You did.
Yeah.
Once again, a beautiful display of democracy in action. We're not getting any funny business out of the state of Georgia. The officials are content with how it's going. We have a long way to go. The counting could take some time. I do not expect it to be called tonight, but we will be going through it. But already, we know on the numbers that we have, we won. Democracy won. Usually, a special election after a general, you have about 50% fall off in who comes out to vote. Here, you had 5 million voted in Georgia in November. we're definitely over 4.5 million.
4.6 million people voted compared. For a runoff, that's really
Huge.
good. And let's not forget, Chris, this is happening as we're going into a joint chief session of Congress, where Biden's electoral victory will officially be certified. And then you have all these folks, these Republicans, who are going to try to stop it, but they can't really legally. The president has been pressuring the vice president to stop it, which he can't really do. He doesn't have the power to do. We're in the middle of a pandemic. What else could we have going on right now, especially when it concerns politics in this country?
See what happened in Pennsylvania today?
Yeah.
That's what you could have happening.
Yeah.
It could look like one of those
Refusing
scenes.
to seat a Democrat.
One of those scenes from Eastern Europe, where all of a sudden it's like a Donnybrook in the middle of an official breeding. I'm surprised they didn't start throwing punches at each other today. That's how sad and savage what's going on is right now. Right now. So you're hoping that with change, with a new year, comes a better way. We're not seeing it yet. But enough about where we think we would be. How about where we are? We have a key race alert for you right now. Let's get the latest on the race. All right, here we are. Obviously, you know who the players are now. Let's take a look at the wall. You have two different setups here, right? You have Loeffler, who was seated by the governor to replace somebody who left because of a health check, right? So now she's in there against Raphael Warnock. Warnock is, of course, royalty in Georgia in terms of his family. Ebenezer Baptist, his father, created that church with Dr. King. So, you know, a lot of legacy there. You look at the race, 50.4 for him, 49.6. There has been word that Warnock, the Reverend, is seeing this with such optimism. He may come out and speak. If he does, we'll bring that right away. Now, the other race, David Perdue. He had a lot of stink put on him because of his stock jockeying, and that's an interesting contrast. You know, Trump people are supposed to be about anti-elite. You don't get more elite than this guy, and yet he was seen as going to be very strong. It's 50-50, a statistical dead heat there with John Ossoff, the man who calls himself a journalist, a media executive. Now, he was got some shine on him when he had a race in Georgia that he lost for the House, but it was seen as a very expensive race and showed potential. It's all locked up there. Now, so that is the key race alert. How did we get here? Where are we going to go? Let's go to the man, JB at the Magic Wall. Good to see you, brother. Happy New Year.
It's great to see you. First, let's pour a beer out for Phil Mattingly. He's covering the Electoral College count tomorrow, so I'm here filling in for him. Let me just first show you where we are. Remember, the Democrats need to win both these seats to take control of the Senate. Right now, Raphael Warnock is leading by 35,000 votes. Doesn't feel like a lot, but that's 3 times what Joe Biden won Georgia by in November, and it's outside the realm of a recount. That's where his lead is right now.
Now, you were telling me before, there is no law of a recount. How does it work?
Within 0.5%, one of the candidates can request it, and it will happen. Okay. The other race is razor thin. You see David Perdue leading by 1,200 votes now. An hour ago, Chris, he was leading by more than 100,000. What happened? Let's look at DeKalb County right here. The Atlanta area is where the votes have come in from Democrats in big ways. John Ossoff leads by 200,000 votes in DeKalb County. There's a 200,000 vote margin. We got all of that, or most of it, about 1 hour ago, and it closed that enormous gap. We're expecting 19,000 more votes from DeKalb County. They could be counted by 2 a.m. We're watching them very closely. Look at this split. You have an 82-17 split. 19,000 votes. If Ossoff gets 80% of it, he nets at least 11,000 votes. Just to remind us of what that means, if he nets 11,000 votes, he's leading all of a sudden. We also have votes in Fulton County still to come. Fulton County is Metro Atlanta. You can see John Ossoff again.
Oh, the Reverend is speaking right now. Here's Reverend Warnock is speaking. We heard he might. Let's hear him.
And as a son of Georgia, my roots are planted deeply in Georgia soil. A child who grew up in the Caton Homes housing projects of Savannah, Georgia. Number 11 out of 12 children. A proud graduate of Morehouse College and the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, the spiritual home of Martin Luther King Jr. and Congressman John Lewis. A son of my late father, who was a pastor, a veteran, and a small businessman. And my mother, who as a teenager growing up in Waycross, Georgia, used to pick somebody else's cotton. But the other day, because this is America, the 82-year-old hands that used to pick somebody else's cotton went to the polls and picked her youngest son to be a United States Senator. So I come before you tonight as a man who knows that the improbable journey that led me to this place in this historic moment in America could only happen here. We were told that we couldn't win this election. But tonight, we prove that with hope, hard work, and the people by our side, anything is possible. May my story be an inspiration to some young person who is trying to grasp and grab hold of the American dream. And so, Georgia, I am honored by the faith that you have shown in me. And I promise you this tonight. I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia. No matter who you cast your vote for in this election, in this moment in American history, Washington has a choice to make. In fact, all of us have a choice to make. Will we continue to divide, distract, and dishonor one another? Or will we love our neighbors as we love ourselves? Will we play political games while real people suffer? Or will we win righteous fights together, standing shoulder to shoulder, for the good of Georgia, for the good of our country? Will we seek to destroy one another as enemies, or heed the call towards the common good, building together what Dr. King called the beloved community? Here's what I know. I know that we can beat this pandemic with science and good old-fashioned common sense. I know we can rebuild a fairer economy by respecting the dignity of work and the workers who do it. An economy that honors those whom we now call essential workers by paying them an essential wage and providing for them essential benefits. And so to everyone out there struggling today, whether you voted for me or not, know this: I hear you, I see you, and every day I'm in the United States Senate, I will fight for you. I will fight for your family. To our supporters, our incredible campaign team, and to my family, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And to every Georgian who marched with us, organized with us, prayed for us, fought for us, believed in us, or shared their story and their pain with us, thank you for all of your love and support. In the words of Dr. King, who grew up just a few blocks from where I'm sitting right now, we are tied in a single garment of destiny. We are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I remember my dad in this moment. He used to wake me up every morning at dawn. It was morning, but it was still dark. It's dark right now, but morning comes. And Scripture tells us that weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. Let us rise up, greet the morning, and meet the challenges of this moment. Together we can do the necessary work and win the future for all of our children. Thank you. God bless you, Georgia, and God bless these United States of America.
All right, there you have
Sounds
the
like
Reverend
victory
Warnock.
speech to me, right?
It absolutely sounds like a victory speech. Now, CNN is not calling this race. The race has not been called by anybody, but the Reverend feeling that his margin is secure. If we put it up on the board for you right now, at the most recent count, he is outside the statutory 0.5% margin, where if it were in that, his opponent could ask for a recount and it would be awarded. Now, this is still preliminary. You still have votes coming in, so we don't know. But
50.4 to 49.6. But also, and we're going to hear from Kelly Loeffler in just a moment. She's also saying that she has a path to victory. But I think we need to focus on him since he spoke. You said that he was basically royalty in Georgia, talking about his roots down in Georgia, saying he grew up in the Savannah housing project, tied to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Right, Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Ebenezer Baptist Church. John Lewis, even doing a quote from Dr. King, "We're tied in a single garment of destiny," from a famous Dr. King speech. So there he is. He says he's a son of Georgia. He expects to win. He was no doubt the strongest of all the candidates with the deepest ties to that state.
Right. He certainly has the lineage there, and he was portraying himself as a true son of Georgia.
But so does Perdue. Not as deep as him.
Look, what is the reality? The reality is they both have a very strong case to make as being there. Ossoff and Loeffler have different positioning, but this is very close for a reason on all fronts, right? This is a very divided state within a very divided country. It was interesting for me to hear Warnock talking about trying to bridge. Now, I know that you hear politicians say that, but it's a little different right now. Him reaching out to people, if you voted for me or you didn't. Here's what I believe in. And what he was talking about wasn't just the pandemic being science and common sense, which is true in Georgia everywhere else, but that he wants to fight for things for that state specifically. I think we're going to be hearing a lot of that.
Yeah.
He doesn't say Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. He says Georgia, Georgia, Georgia.
It's very similar to the vice president-elect's message back in November. But he said, they told me I couldn't win. I will work for all of Georgia, as you said. I hear you. I see you. I will fight for you. That's his message. And that appeared to be, at least at this point, we have not called it, but probably a winning message in Georgia.
Now, just in terms of timing, we have the Wizard of Oz here, Harry Enton, with us. Why is he not going out prematurely?
I mean, where the votes are remaining are mostly in Fulton County and the Atlanta suburbs. And based on what's remaining, I actually believe that margin is going to widen, not just in the special race with Warnock, but also I think Ossoff is probably going to gain considerable ground as well. I wouldn't be surprised if the final margin in the special, Warnock's lead, ends up being 1.5 to 2 points. So I don't think it's particularly early. Obviously, we have not called the race, but at this point, it looks pretty gosh darn good for Raphael Warnock.
When do you think we will know for sure?
Oh, God. I mean,
because we still have, 17,000 ballots overseas?
We still have a ton of votes to be counted, but it should be in the Democratic areas. It's going to be a lot of African-American, deeply African-American precincts, and Warnock knows the math. The Democrats know the math that's out there. Now, obviously, we need to be as cautious as we possibly can be. It's better to be right than to be fast, but the fact of the matter is I would much rather be Raphael Warnock than Kelly Loeffler.
Let me just say that I lived in Atlanta for 7 years, in Fulton County, voted in Fulton County, lived there. It is heavily Atlanta, right? Heavily African-American, very liberal, inside the perimeter. Once you get outside of Fulton County and the surrounding counties, then it becomes very red. Even still, with the high number of African-Americans and liberals in the Atlanta area, this is surprising to see Georgia turn red. And there are people, Stacey Abrams, has helped a lot, could end up being the hero. But also we shouldn't forget about LaTosha Brown, Black Votes Matter, the Harvard Institute of Politics, signing up millions of people traveling across the country, and especially in the Deep South, on a bus to sign up people to vote, many African Americans.
On Monday night, as we approached midnight going into Tuesday, I was on your program and I was talking about how the early vote showed that African Americans, as a percentage of the electorate, made up a larger share of the early vote than they did back in November. I have very little doubt, based upon the numbers that we're seeing so far this evening, that they will make up a larger share of the total vote. Black voters came out. They came out not just in the Atlanta suburbs, but in the Black Belt as well, in the southwest part of that state, from Augusta down to the southwest.
All voters came out. You had tremendous turnout. That's going to be a story about this. But the big headline is going to be what this would mean for President-elect Joe Biden.
Absolutely.
One race is not enough. If Warnock has this great victory to celebrate, it is meaningless because you'll wind up still having the Republicans in control. A Democrat-controlled Senate is always important, but in this kind of climate, Harry, it's everything for Biden. If he has control of the Senate, he has a chance of getting $2,000 checks.
But he's saying he believes that
But you need both, just so people at home understand.
Right, you need
both. You are not one and done.
You're not one and done.
And then you still need the vice president,
Correct.
which means you wouldn't even have control of the Senate until, at a minimum, when she is sworn in.
Right, January 20th, right? But look, based upon the votes that are still out remaining, I know right now John Ossoff, is only at 50% of the vote versus Raphael Warnock at 50.4%. But I do believe that the votes remaining out there will, in fact, lead to Ossoff winning. That is certainly the far better chance at this point.
When you get confident, I get nervous. So I got to go over to John.
I'm always nervous around
John
you.
Berman. We left JB before. We were trying to understand the story of how we got to where we are. So you were listening to the Reverend there, and you understand. You agree with that rationale that where he is and what you see as outstanding votes, it makes sense that he came out?
Absolutely. I'll just review one more time what we were talking about before. DeKalb County is the place where we think there are the most number of votes left. We think there are 19,000 votes left in DeKalb County, which will be counted maybe the next few hours, maybe tomorrow. If that splits 80-20, he nets 11,000 votes. That would increase his lead from 35,000 up to the mid-40s. And remember, this is even outside the percentage. 0.5% is what you need to ask for a recount in Georgia. Warnock is leading outside that area right now. One other thing, I want to talk about how Raphael Warnock won. First of all, this is historic. You're talking about an African-American who is a senator now, or could very well be a senator, from an old southern state, right? An old South state. Tim Scott from South Carolina, and now perhaps Raphael Warnock from Georgia. That would be historic. Let me show you one thing. Let me show you where Warnock outperformed Joe Biden. Right? Joe Biden's a baseline for a Democrat to win Georgia. He won by 11,000 votes. If you want to win Georgia, you have to do as well as Joe Biden or better. Raphael Warnock outperformed Joe Biden in every county where there's color on this map right now, which is almost everywhere. He ran better than Joe Biden in almost all places. Harry was talking about the African-American vote. You look at this swath of the state right here, from Columbus all the way up to Augusta. Some people call this the Black Belt, heavily African-American. He did very well in this area. Again, outperforming what Joe Biden did. I'm just going to click on some of these counties. Macon County, you can see Raphael Warnock at 62%. What did Joe Biden do in the election? He was at 61%. 1.5% doesn't seem like a lot, but if you go county to county, down here in Sumter County, this is Jimmy Carter's hometown, by the way, Joe Biden was at 52%, Raphael Warnock at 53%. So he picked up piece by piece, even or better, almost everywhere in the state.
Now, do you think it's going to be a straight color play, or do you think it's about what's happened since the election as well?
It's not just a straight color play at all. You also have the suburbs of Atlanta, which are racially mixed. I mean, there's young, educated whites, there's Asian Americans, African Americans. It's a big mix. Kelly Loeffler was picked in order to pick up some of that suburban vote.
Gentlemen, I just think it's what John was just saying. It's even though these margins differences with Biden are so small, that's basically a river, right? It's a wide river given how close this race is. And one thing that I'll note that's really interesting, where Warnock seems to be running the most ahead of Ossoff, is actually in Atlanta and those suburbs. To me, I would have thought perhaps it was in those heavy African-American areas along the Black Belt and from Augusta down to the southwest part of the state, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. In fact, in that Georgia 6th congressional district, right, that I was talking about that over and over and over again, the lead up to the election, there's a lot of white, well-educated voters in that district, in the Atlanta suburbs, and it actually seems in that area is where Warnock is actually most outperforming Ossoff. It's just a very interesting map.
Harold, hang on one second here, because we just did get some more votes
in Fulton County, right?
In Fulton County. I just want to show you overall what this does to the other Senate race right now. David Perdue only leading by 919 votes. That's because we got a small handful of votes from Fulton County. And now you can see John Ossoff leads there by more than 200,000 votes. There are still votes to count in Fulton County. A few thousand votes to count in Fulton County. We may not see them until tomorrow, but again, when you're picking up 70% of them, he will net more than 1,000 votes in the votes remaining in all likelihood. The same thing with DeKalb County. He will net more than 10,000 votes there, which is why John Ossoff, will not even in the lead yet overall, maybe feeling good about things right now.
But it almost certainly, if it stays in play like this, would be within the margin of recount. But, you know, we keep talking about recount as if that means it's going to have a change in the state of play. All it means is that they wind up confirming their count.
Correct.
And historically, you don't see, you know, we keep bashing our democracy, and we know why it's being done, and everybody knows it could be better, but we know why it's being played to advantage right now, and it's ugly, and it's obvious. But, you know, when they do recounts, the changes, and John, you know, you check me on this, if you get a few hundred votes that change on a recount, it's a big deal.
The Georgia recount for President Trump and Joe Biden, The president actually netted a couple thousand, Harry. That's right. He netted a couple thousand votes.
He netted a couple thousand votes, and that was actually pretty large, right? It was something like 0.04 percentage points the margin closed by, and that's rather large. You really would need probably a final margin of, say, 1,000 votes in the overall count, maybe 2,000 at most in order for a recount to change things. And based upon the trends so far, I don't think we're heading in that direction, but obviously we have to wait to count the votes and see.
Yes, you have to. But I'm saying again, when we say that there may be a recount, it's not because there's trouble. It's just process. And you want to check everything, especially in this climate.
We got to finish counting the votes from tonight.
Right.
First, right? And there are still absentee ballots that arrived in counties across the state that haven't been counted yet. There are still military ballots, more than 10,000 or so, that can arrive until Friday that need to be counted. Something else I want to show you here. There aren't that many ballots left, though. I can show you right now. Go down to here. These are the only counties. Wow, there are only 3 counties left in all of Georgia that have 10% left, roughly, to count. You can see 2 of them are Democratic counties. You can see John Ossoff leading in Hancock County. It's tiny. You know, he's got 10% left to count. He might net a couple dozen votes there. You look here, Newton County. Now, Newton County is a bigger county. There's only 89% reporting. John Ossoff had a big haul from Newton about 45 minutes ago. The fact that there's that many votes left bodes well for him. He may net a couple thousand votes there. And then there's one Republican county yet that's not at 90%. That's Gilmer County, 25% left to go. Look, David Perdue is just crushing John Ossoff there. He will do well. He may net another 1,000 or 2 votes there, but probably not enough to measure up against what will be a big haul from DeKalb County for Ossoff.
And just to be clear, DeKalb County are early in-person votes that are yet to be counted.
Early in-person votes, which have skewed heavily Democratic. The early in-person votes in DeKalb County have roughly mirrored this. John Ossoff has pulled more than 80% from the early in-person voting, and that's what's remaining. So again, we expect him to net around 10,000 votes here, which when you look at the margin, would put him in the lead.
Overseas.
We're talking about the, he said, Harry mentioned the river, right? Let's talk about the ocean here. I want to talk about the big picture because we are all sitting around here. I have to stress the importance of the black vote, not only in Georgia, but in this entire election and what this means for Joe Biden, especially when you look at how Joe Biden really recovered from South Carolina, the black vote. Then you have Georgia. Then you have Pennsylvania. And then you have the other states where a large black population voted for Joe Biden. This has consequences for the beginning of his presidency. Look where we were on November 3rd. We had a Republican White House, we had a Republican Senate, and just 2 years ago we had a Republican Congress. And now look where we are. Look where we are. What does this mean? We all cover this every day. What does this mean for Joe Biden's presidency if this does indeed turn out that he has a Democratic Senate tied, Vice President has to break the tie?
It'll mean everything for the next 18 months.
I think that's the important thing.
Right. It'll mean everything for his start and what he's able to do in setting a table for an agenda into the midterms. Let's take a break. When we come back, the guys were talking a little bit earlier about the difference between how Raphael Warnock, the Reverend who just came out, seemed to be giving a victory speech, and John Ossoff. Why are there differences in performance? We'll discuss. Stay with CNN. All right, once again, we're living history. Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo here with the whole team. A dramatic night, history being made in the moment. Georgia is every bit as close and then some as imagined. We just had the Reverend Raphael Warnock, Democrat, come out and say, apparently, he believes he won. The race has not been called. We're not calling it. Right now, the margin of that race is outside the requestable recount amount, but there are a lot of counts meant to be, a lot of votes still meant to be counted. But the big headline is, one, democracy won. People came out and voted in this election like we haven't seen in a long time for a special election. Also, Joe Biden is in better position right now. We don't know what's going to happen. He needs both of these seats to change the Senate. But he is closer now to having a chance to govern with a mandate he never imagined a few months ago.
And that's the big picture I was talking about. When he's talking about the river, Harry, this is the ocean. This is the big picture. Will he have a roadmap to get his agenda through after the Trump era comes to a close? If both Democratic candidates win, then it is a 50-50 Senate, and that comes with the soon-to-be vice president, right?
The vice president is the president of the Senate, breaks ties.
But if the Republicans win,
they win one of these seats.
He keeps his power, keeps a check and balance on Joe Biden and on that White House. So, in all just weeks ago before the inauguration, and then you will have, Chris, if this does indeed, if it turns out to call it tonight or whatever, but even if it does look like they're going to win and no one is called, meaning the Democrats go into that session tomorrow on a high note with Mitch McConnell being possibly in their minds in the minority. Imagine just overnight the flip in Washington and what that means for Joe Biden. That's why he's keeping an eye on this.
Well, what it means for Joe Biden is going to be apparent. What this means for the Republicans tomorrow, I think, is a little bit trickier question. Do they come in there with air out of their sails, or do they come in there more fierce? Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about races that are not decided. So let's give you the latest, a key race alert. Here it is. All right, now, if we look at the board, you see right there, Raphael Warnock, as I said, the Reverend from Ebenezer Baptist, of course, made famous by Dr. King, using it as a platform for his message. He has deep roots in the state. He just came out and said, apparently, that he thinks he's going to win. Those are the numbers. 2,208,580, 2,172,931 for his opponent, who was put in the seat by the governor to fill a vacancy. Now, David Perdue versus Jon Ossoff. This is a dead heat. Ossoff has been creeping his way back into this race. 2,191,369 for the incumbent, 2,190,47 for Jon Ossoff. Why is there optimism there? Because in one of the 2 or 3 remaining counties with significant numbers of votes to still come in, they are overweighted Democrat in a way that could change this situation, Don.
Yeah, well, all night, everyone has been asking me, texting me, emailing me, oh my gosh, this is a nail biter. I can't stand it. Who's going to win? What's going to happen? So let's have that discussion, shall we? Let's bring in some folks here. I want to talk to CNN political commentators Bakari Sellers, Scott Jennings, and S.E. Cupp. Hello, one and all. How you doing? Doing okay?
Making it.
Bakari Sellers, let's talk to. We've been talking a lot about the black vote and what this means for the Biden presidency. Where do you see this going? If this does indeed turn out that Democrats win, again, we have not called it, if they win both seats, what does this all mean?
I mean, from a 50,000-foot view, Don, I mean, you look at the fact that you have a 33-year-old Jewish journalist, and you have Raphael Warnock, who is the pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the spiritual home of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It puts you in the mind state of Rabbi Herschel and Dr. King marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It just harkens back and it gives you that warm spirit. You think about John Lewis and everything that he stood for. You know, his district is the one that we're focused on today. It's the Georgia 6 that we're focused on in those votes coming in. And so all of those things come home. It reminds me of December 12th when Selma came through for Doug Jones, making him a United States Senator. But when you actually look on the ground, Don, this is the most amazing thing. You talked about LaTosha Brown and Black Voters Matter earlier, but the organizers on the ground, not just Stacey Abrams, but the fraternities and sororities, the Links, Jack and Jill, all of these groups, all of these black groups that came together to organize. I mean, they organized from, you know, Magic City is not just known for its lemon pepper wings anymore. They organized from Magic City all the way to the C-suite. I mean, they did absolutely everything possible to get this turnout today. And once again, we're talking about black voters from Pennsylvania all the way throughout the country. The reason that this country has changed has been because of black voters. Yeah. So shout out to everyone in Georgia tonight.
But you're absolutely right. But what this portends for the Biden presidency, S.E. Cupp, if you're looking at this, yes, we should give homage to the folks who helped this. Who would have ever thought you would have seen Georgia turn blue? For judges, confirmation hearings are going to be different. Committee chairs on major committees, how votes on Biden's priorities get scheduled and go to the floor. There's a lot at stake right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's really remarkable. Georgia has not elected a Democrat to the Senate in 20 years, 24 if you don't count Zell Miller, which Georgians will understand. But it really is remarkable if Warnock ends up winning and Ossoff ends up winning. The Democrats who hoped that Biden's election would help erase the past 4 years and really usher in an era that was the antithesis of the Trump era, well, they weren't going to get that without these two guys getting elected. And we'll have to see if they get that. But that was the only way they were really going to get a lot of the things that they voted for and hoped for. And so I can imagine how many Democrats are on the edge of their seats, because it is night and day from these two guys losing this election and these two guys winning this election. Really, everything on the Democratic agenda is at stake tonight and over the next few hours. Now, I think there's an argument that you could make if you're a sort of a small government conservative that having one-party control isn't always great. I would just like to offer some caution. Sometimes you get great things that happen. Sometimes you get a lot of overreach. If you remember, things like the Iraq War happened when Republicans controlled all of Washington, and things like extrajudicial killings happen when things like Democrats controlled Washington under Obama. I think good government happens when you have two strong parties, but you don't. The Republican Party is at the weakest I've ever seen it. And so in the absence of a strong Republican Party, you gotta hope for a strong Democratic Party to actually be able to get in and get some things done.
Well, I have to tell our viewers, we're just reading the tea leaves. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. We have not called these races, but if you look at the momentum here, it does look like Democrats will win. Again, we'll have to see when the final vote is counted, when the actual votes are counted and it is called. Scott, you heard what SC said. The Republicans were hoping to keep a check on the Biden White House, right? To hold the Senate, to keep the current president's priorities and his legislation in place. If this does happen, what does this mean for Republicans?
Well, it weakens their ability to slow down Biden from a procedural perspective. If they control the floor of the Senate, it'll make staffing the government a lot smoother for Biden. I suspect a couple of Biden's appointees who were in trouble under Republican majority control will now find their way into their cabinet positions rather easily. So that will help Joe Biden. And I suspect the first thing they'll try to do is move to repeal the Trump tax cuts, because I think that's something they could do without having to get to 60 votes in the Senate through a process called reconciliation. But a lot of the other things that Democrats want to do would require still getting to the 60-vote threshold in the Senate, provided that they don't eliminate the legislative filibuster. And so I think one of the results of this is there will be, I think as SC pointed out, a lot of expectations from Democrats who will say, well, we've got full control. Let's do everything we ever dreamed of. That still won't be possible in the Senate. And so I think Biden is going to have to manage some expectations of people on his far left flank that some of these things, even in a 50-50 world where you have a sort of a majority, still aren't possible.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bakari. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I don't want to spike the football, but I mean, for a lot of Democrats tonight, it surely would feel good to say, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, ranking member of Judiciary Lindsey Graham, or Chuck Grassley. I mean, those things actually do mean something. And we're talking about bringing things to the floor like a $2,000 stimulus check. We're talking about bringing things to the floor like the John Lewis Voting Rights Bill, like the George Floyd Policing Act. These are things that should be debated. Now, whether or not it gets 60 votes or not, Mitch McConnell actually stifled the process. So by demoting Mitch McConnell tonight, because he didn't take a stand against Trumpism a long time ago, and we can debate whether or not that was a strategy that cost him down ballot or not in these Georgia races. But by demoting Mitch McConnell tonight, there are progressive issues that are good and healthy for the country that we can even have a debate on. I mean, so my whole thing is that with redistricting coming in 2022, you asked me a question that I didn't really answer earlier because I wanted to talk about black voters, but Joe Biden has to go big. Like there's no, with redistricting, there's a chance you're gonna have trouble in the House because of the Republican governors that are seated there now. But But you got to go big while you have an opportunity right now. And I expect that Joe Biden's going to feel that pressure, and he's going to do that.
Scott, go ahead.
I totally agree. I totally agree with Bakari. I want the Democrats to go as big and as left as they could ever possibly dream of. I hope they go big and left tomorrow.
Well, he
I hope
said
it
big.
starts
Did he say
tomorrow,
left?
Because that'll make the midterms all that much better for the Republicans, I think.
Oh, Scott, already
but a
looking forward.
$2,000 check. But a $2,000 check isn't left. I mean, look, if AOC is agreeing with Josh Hawley, how left is that? I mean, that's not left. I mean, if you want to talk about criminal justice reform being left, when I got Rand Paul and Tim Scott who agree with it, that's one. I mean, that's okay. We'll call that left. These are things that are good for the country that you can get bipartisan support. I'm not saying that we're going to go out here and build windmills on top of everything and hug every tree, but I'm going to say that we're going to push good policy. That's what we're going to do.
Essie, but what does this mean, Essie, for this is good news if it does indeed happen. It may be good news for not only for Democrats, but also for Republicans who don't want to have to deal with the conspiracy theorist part of the Republican
we'll still have to deal with them. Trust me, they're not going anywhere.
What does that mean for the QAnon conspiracy theory people
well, they're
who
in
want to
Congress, Don. I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube in that, and so we'll have to deal with that. But to counter Bakari, and I agree with everything he said to Scott, the Democrats will get to debate ideas and policies that matter to them. Isn't it great that maybe conservatives will also get to debate policies that matter to us for the first time in years, because we aren't being hijacked by someone who coddles those QAnon nut jobs?
No, go on.
I mean, we haven't had really good debates about the debt, the deficit, taxes, about trade, about protectionism. We hadn't had
Essie, I'm
those
joking, but
great
you're absolutely
debates
right.
in years.
You're absolutely right. And again, we have to see where this goes, but people can actually debate policy. You said that the genie's out of the bottle when it comes to that sort of conspiracy theorist, people who are willing to, not even consider the Constitution, but they're planning on doing tomorrow. What does that mean? Does this take us to a saner place in our politics, or does it light a fire, an even bigger fire under that part of the Republican Party?
The Republican Party's in shambles.
No, I mean, my view is
I'm chiming in as the Democrat.
Bakari first, and then Scott. Bakari first. Go ahead, Bakari.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that the Republican Party's in shambles. I mean, anytime you have Congresswoman Green flying down on Air Force One saying that the Georgia ballot should be thrown out, but her race should still count, that's insanity. You have 13 Republicans standing up tomorrow who were just plotting a course for 2024, throwing democracy under the bus. That's insanity. You have Donald Trump and Eric Trump coming out saying that anybody who doesn't join their father's Titanic mission tomorrow is going to be primaried and lose. That's insanity. So, while we're pushing Joe Biden to go big, the Republican Party has a problem on their hands.
It's
and
not
I
even
think
just
it's healthy that we're going to have some debates.
It's not even just the conspiracy theorist, and that is a very unique, troubling problem. It's that the party has become a party of stunts over the past 4 years. We're going to see one tomorrow night, in fact. But let me remind you, this is a party that stormed a skiff that many of them were invited to. This is a party. Devin Nunes sued a fake cow just 2 years ago. Trump very dangerously tear-gassed peaceful protesters so he could take a photo op in front of a church. I mean, this party has made the stunts, instead of the sideshow, the show. And so it will be great if that sideshow kind of leaves with Trump and some of these other Trumpists, if we could get back to, governing, legislating, policymaking, debating, that sort of thing.
Scott?
Yeah, look, I think the next generation of Republican leaders here, whoever they happen to be and whoever becomes the nominee in 24, has a real challenge. To do some of what SE is talking about would help recover some folks in the suburbs. But they also want to try to retain some of the people that have realigned into the Republican Party under Donald Trump. That's the real challenge, is that Trump brought in some folks and drove some folks away. And so for the Republicans to be a national viable party, they're going to have to get back some of the people they lost while simultaneously retaining some people who did like some of the things Trump did. I don't know which person is going to do that, and I don't know which faction of the party is going to lead that. But that's the mission. Otherwise, the algorithm doesn't work. I mean, Republicans haven't won the national popular vote very often in presidential races in the last 30 years unless their last name was Bush.
Yeah.
And so finding someone who can realign, who can understand the realignment while retaining the old world suburban coalition is the key. I don't know who it's going to be. I think there's a few folks out there, but I don't know who it's going to be.
As the old folks I grew up with down south say, don't put the cart before the horse. Cool your jets. We have to see. The votes are still being counted. But if you actually look at the board, it doesn't get any closer, I don't believe, 50-50, 49.6 to 50.4. That is really close. So stand by, guys. We're going to see you in just a bit. We got a lot of ground to cover here. We're going to, on the verge tonight, of what could be a monumental change for Democrats in Washington. What it all means for Joe Biden's presidency if Dems win both runoff elections in Georgia and take control of the Senate. Don't go anywhere.
All right, this is the most important pair of election contests since Joe Biden beat Donald Trump. And in fact, for President-elect Joe Biden to get anything done, he's going to need both of these seats. Just one won't get it done. The Republicans stay in power if it splits tonight. So let's take a look at a key race alert. Right now, Raphael Warnock. He came out, gave a very powerful statement, sounded like a victory speech. He is 35,649 votes ahead. He is out of the requestable recount range right now, but there's still votes to go in counties that can help and hurt him. David Perdue, incumbent, 1,322 votes ahead. That is a dead heat with John Ossoff. Again, votes that are coming in could make a very big difference in that race very quickly. We will be watching it. Now, DeKalb County, you're going to hear us talking about that county. Why? Because there are a lot of votes that could come in, maybe 20,000, maybe more, and it breaks about 80-20 in favor of Democrats. So let's go to Nick Valencia, who is in that county, to talk to us about what's going on there tonight. How you doing, my friend?
Hey there, Chris. Good morning here from DeKalb County. Some unfortunate news to report. Elections officials now telling us here that it's just recently, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, that they encountered some technical glitches, which is causing some significant delays in getting those votes counted. We know that there's about 19,000 in-person votes left to be counted. That's according to the last update from the Secretary of State's office, Gabe Sterling. The last update here, Chris, that we got from DeKalb County, 11:09. They're working on a statement to give us the details of exactly what's going on behind here, but activity behind those doors has virtually come to a standstill as we are all waiting on those returns. 19,000 votes that really could change the difference and outcome of this race. I know everyone watching it very closely. Chris?
Now, Nick, people are going to seize on this, so let me just give you a quick follow-up here. What is the best reckoning right now of how officials are explaining what the problem is and what it isn't about?
They're not. Just plain and simply, they're not. They are giving us very limited information, just saying on the record that there are technical glitches. Now, we did hear from somebody inside, but that wasn't from an official, so I don't want to repeat these unconfirmed information. There are some rumors floating around here exactly what can happen, but we don't want to tell our viewers unconfirmed information. Right now, though, what officials are saying is that there are technical glitches causing delays, and we're expecting to get some details here in the next few minutes, Chris.
All right, Nick, let me know what you get. Thank you very much. Look, that's going to be important. The integrity of the election and how it goes. Any kind of word about any kind of misgiving that can fuel any kind of doubt is going to have a ton of gasoline thrown on it between now and the next 12 hours. So we're going to need clarity there. This county really matters, has all night, matters for the rest of the night as well.
It matters so much. Why? Well, look, if you look at the David Perdue, John Ossoff race, David Perdue leads by just 1,300 votes right now. He's actually expanded that lead in the last few minutes. I'll tell you why in just a moment. But first, let's go to DeKalb County right here. You can see John Ossoff with a 200,000 vote lead. He has a mammoth lead in this county. He's pulling about 82% of the votes. So if there's 19,000 votes left to count, and it breaks 80% for him, he will net 11,000 votes, which would mean he would take the lead. That is why we are hanging on these 19,000 votes, and we're waiting to hear again from Nick Valencia about what's holding them up. Now, as I mentioned, you can see John Ossoff now trailing by 1,300 votes. That just changed because votes came in from Fulton County. I'm going to put my glasses on to read exactly how many votes came in here. I can write it here. We can do some math, which is super fun. Right? Hang on one second.
Sure.
Right here.
I'm not going anywhere.
So 2,000 votes came in, right? Perdue got 1,166 of them. John Ossoff got 763. That means the percent of the votes that came in were about 60 for Perdue and about 40 for John Ossoff. Now, you're going to say, well, wait a second. This is Fulton County, one of the most Democratic counties in the state. True. But these could be Republican precincts. Don Lemon, who lived for years in the Atlanta area, can tell you there are Republican precincts in that area. David Perdue did better. This is why we're not calling right now the state, despite the fact that we think that most of the vote remaining, or much of it, is Democratic, and that John Ossoff very well could take the lead soon. We just can't call it yet because we have to see these precincts come in.
All right. So we'll be watching it over here. Don, I come over to you right now. You were talking about the experience of being in there, and obviously the representation of the African-American vote today is going to be a huge part of the headline story. It's not over yet, but they've already made their stand.
Yeah, and I have the perfect person to talk to about that, Chris and John. I want to bring in now newly elected Democratic Congresswoman Nikema Williams of Georgia. She is also the chair of Georgia's Democratic Party, also picking up Congressman John Lewis, the late Congressman John Lewis's seat, the 5th District of Georgia. Thank you so much, and it's good to see you. Congresswoman, votes are still being counted. How are you feeling about your chances right now?
I feel great. That's why the only reason that I'm up at 1 a.m. talking with you tonight. I am staying up to watch these last votes be counted, but I firmly believe in counting every vote, so I am patient. I'm allowing the Election Day workers to do their job safely, and I would hope that everyone else is doing the same thing. I've heard about some people gathering at some of the tabulation centers, so I'm patient. I want accurate results, and I'm not necessarily looking for expediency.
I'm glad you said that, because I need to tell our viewers again that CNN has not called either of these races. So with that said, if it does happen, Congresswoman, Democrats could take control, or Congresswoman, excuse me, could take control of the Senate.
When it happens.
Yeah. Well, all right, I'll give you that language. I'll allow that. Could take control of the Senate, take control of the House, and the presidency. What does that mean for the country? We're at the precipice of, I mean, this is history in the making. This is momentous.
I mean, it means that we have an opportunity to actually govern in this country, and we can get past all of the Republican gridlock that we've seen, where the divisiveness is just for the sake of being divisive. And so I'm looking forward to, number one, getting our country's economy back on track, getting this pandemic under control, making sure that we can get this vaccine out to everyone safely, and getting our children back to school safely. That is first and foremost. And then next on my list is making sure that we get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act through the Senate, because the United States Senate, Republican control is what has held this up. And I heard a lot of people saying how they felt about Congressman Lewis after he passed away, but the Senate still was not willing to even take this bill up for a vote. And I cannot wait to see someone who started his career in John Lewis's office as an intern, John Lewis's pastor, and someone in me who's been mentored by Congressman Lewis and taking over his seat, being able to get this legislation passed in his honor.
I was just going to say, don't forget about you. I know I've got to ask you this, because in 2006 or whatever, I was in Chicago, and I saw, or 2004, I got to see the rise of Barack Obama. I moved to Georgia in 2008 and covered that election, and then in 2012 as well. But I remember, Congresswoman, being in Ohio and Iowa and what have you, and as Ohio goes, so goes the rest of the country. I would do my live shot, and then they call the election, I get on a plane and go home. Now it is Georgia. Georgia is deciding the presidency and deciding the Senate. What does that feel like? The tide has turned.
Well, Don, this is what we've been saying for so long, and finally we got the resources to do our work to scale, and then winning in November showed the voters on the ground that winning is in fact possible, and voters showed back up. I kept telling everyone who would listen to me that this election was not a fluke in November. It was not about Donald Trump. It was about voters on the ground using their power and demanding that they have representatives actually willing to listen to them and represent them in Washington. The voters have spoken, and I cannot wait until I have 2 Democratic U.S. senators up here in Washington to work with me on behalf of all Georgians.
I want to continue to talk about big picture, but the big picture also black voters. I mean, that is the big picture in this country as well. Made up 29% of the electorate in both runoff races, almost exactly their turnout in November. I mean, in a runoff, that's huge numbers. What do you think, the person whose seat you took over, what do you think the late legendary John Lewis would have to say about that?
I think for Congressman Lewis, he always talked about the beloved community, and what we're building here in Georgia are multiracial coalitions. And so he would look at all of the communities that we've been able to bring together, along with the high turnout in the black community. Everything that he's always fought for is what we're seeing come to fruition in this election cycle. And it's about everybody coming together for the common good.
Is this a moment where you think black voters in this country came into their own?
Black voters have always been the backbone of the Democratic Party, but I think the rest of the country has finally accepted what we've always known. We know that we're powerful, and we know that we can change the results in any election, but finally we were able to convince the rest of the country that our voices are indeed powerful, and we're not going back. We're not going back to a time. Tonight, whenever this race is called, Raphael Warnock will be the first black person ever to represent Georgia in the United States Senate. That is something to be excited about.
Let's move ahead and talk about tomorrow, okay? Because you know what's going on. You were sworn in as a member of Congress a few days ago, which means you'll have a front row seat to Republicans objecting the certification of the Electoral College results tomorrow. How are you and your fellow Democrats going to handle that?
So I am prepared because I have heard that Georgia is going to be one of the states that they're going to contest. On the day of my swearing in, there was some shenanigans on the floor where they were trying to see if they were going to seat the members from the states that they were contesting. And now here we are, and tomorrow is up, and I will be ready to defend our democracy and stand there in honor of Congressman Lewis and fight to protect the votes of everyone who turned out and cast a vote in this historic election cycle. So the Republicans, this is beyond partisanship at this point. This is about patriotism. Are you willing to uphold the Constitution, the oath that you took to uphold our United States Constitution? And what I'm seeing from all of the Republicans that I've seen sign on saying that they're going to contest, I don't understand why they're serving in Congress in a body that they don't even believe in.
Well, get ready because either I will be calling you or Chris will be calling you. Whoever producer gets to you first, we'll have you on tomorrow night to talk about what happens in Washington and as well as what's going on in Georgia. Thank you, Congresswoman. I really appreciate you staying up. Good luck. We'll see what happens.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night or good morning, wherever you are in the country. Listen, this is still close. We still have not called it. It does not get much closer than this. The one person watching this more closely than anyone else outside of Georgia, you better believe, is the President-elect Joe Biden. If Democrats win the 2 Georgia runoff races, Senate control changes hands, and the course of Biden's presidency will be much different. More on our continuing coverage just ahead.
The stakes are so high for all of us moving forward. Who's going to be in control of the Senate? They're going to control the flow of activity, certainly in the first part of this new presidential term. That's why for President-elect Joe Biden, what happens tonight means so much in terms of getting any kind of agenda going. Remember, you have to have control of both houses to get anything done in this culture of opposition. Right now, the races are locked up. Yes, we did see Reverend Raphael Warnock come out, and he gave what sounded like a victory speech. We haven't called anything, but we will call this a key race alert. All right, here we'll start with Reverend Raphael Warnock. He is up 50.4%. He's 35,649 votes ahead. There are remaining votes out there that could help him. Maybe that's why he came out when he did, and we haven't seen the incumbent that he is running against. But it's still very close. We just had some votes come in from one of the counties that goes very blue, but they actually helped the Republicans. So we'll keep an eye on it. David Perdue and John Ossoff. Now this is an every vote counts situation. 1,322 ahead for David Perdue. And again, that race shifted on a blue county that had some votes come in, and they went for his favor. Still a lot of votes to come. Mostly we're looking at DeKalb County. Now, the trick there is officials came out and said they're dealing with a technical issue. That's going to be scary. Hopefully they get it straight. They come out and they give a clear statement about what it is and what the impact is. It's the last thing that we need. All right, so that's the state of the race. How is it playing? Let's go to Washington, D.C. We have Joe Johns there. Joe, it's good to have you tonight.
Good to be there. Now, look, what I want to talk to you about first is Donald Trump. And it's been fascinating watching him on Twitter. He's been up late into the night tweeting a variety of things, almost on cue, as a matter of fact. When the numbers started appearing stronger for Democrats, the president started teeing up the conspiracy theories. But probably the most interesting thing the president has tweeted all evening is about Vice President Mike Pence, who is expected to preside over the Electoral College vote up on Capitol Hill tomorrow. The president writes, if Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers, so on, in a process not approved by their state legislatures. So much there that is wrong, misleading, and false that I can't even begin to unwind it. But what I can tell you is the president has virtually all day long been putting the squeeze on Mike Pence, who is presiding over that event up on Capitol Hill, and went so far as to have a meeting with Pence. But our reporting is that Pence essentially told the president there is nothing he can do to invalidate the election that went for Joe Biden. Of course, that story got out first in the New York Times this evening. And when the president saw it, he immediately reacted, put out a statement through his campaign indicating that, look, the truth is Mike Pence and I are on the same page. The vice president agrees, in fact, that he can act at the Electoral College. Well, it turns out if they're both on the same page, then they're both delusional, because the job of the vice president at this event is nothing more than ceremonial. One more note, the president is expected to give a speech out on the Ellipse later today, and there is some thought that the president might strike out at Mike Pence, which would be a pretty bad spectacle, the idea of the president going after his vice president when they're both on their way out the door.
Boy, oh boy, you talk about gratitude. You know, all we're waiting for is the dunk of the bus running over Mike Pence, driven by outgoing President Donald Trump. Da-dunk. Those are the tires, John. I'll show you later. Joe, thank you very much. Good to have you. All right, let's get some perspective on the nuts and bolts of what can happen tomorrow. Remember, there are rules. This is a constitutionally guided process. All right, so let's bring in Norm Eisen, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, former White House ethics czar, a mentor to me and many on these issues. And of course, you remember him from the impeachment challenges and proceedings. It's good to have you, Norm.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Hi, Don.
Now, the reason that I say that Trump is throwing Pence under the bus is because he has put him in an impossible position. Mike Pence, even as Vice President of the United States, he doesn't control outcomes tomorrow, does he?
No, absolutely not, Chris. As a longtime observer of Washington, you'll remember Brendan Sullivan's famous comment in congressional hearings, I am not a potted plant. The Constitution makes Mike Pence a potted plant. His sole duty under the Constitution is to open the votes of the electors. It's ceremonial, it's procedural. He can do none of those things that Trump says. Decertifying, sending it back to the states, recognizing fraud. The law reserves that to the two houses of Congress. They have to agree in order to toss any of these slates out. That's not going to happen. So, you know, that bus you talked about, Trump driving, it's hit the guardrails that we've talked about so much over the past 4 years, Chris. The guardrails of the Constitution and the rule of law. And Pence cannot do anything about it.
So we have up on the wall the Republicans who we believe are planning to vote against counting electoral votes. And I think this is really important. It is sad that there are so many, to be honest, because you're not going to hear anybody, as far as what we know from what's led up to this moment, who's going to prevent any kind of action based on any type of proof. But I think we should show their faces, and you should get to know their names as much as possible, because this is a period in our history that is going to be remembered acutely. And what people did and what they said should be remembered during this time. Norm, procedurally, what is the most disruptive to the transfer of power that Republicans, or really Retrumplicans, can be tomorrow?
Well, we've seen that for some of the president's followers, there is no limit on the amount of disruption, disrespect, and disregard for the rule of law. That said, what we can reasonably expect is what should be a short and ceremonial recognition of the 306 electoral votes for the president-elect will be dragged out for hours, maybe into the wee hours tomorrow night or beyond, even into Thursday, by objections, one member of the House and one member of the Senate handing up a written objection to a slate. We know the 6 slates that are going to be objected to by those individuals. We can call it a wall of shame, Chris, and they'll object to up to 6 slates. Each of those, Congress is together in a joint session to receive the objections. The vice president can receive those, purely procedural and ceremonial. Then the 2 houses go to their neutral corners. They go back to the chamber of the Senate and that of the House and debate each objection, each state, for 2 hours. The votes are not there to do anything. Each of those slates are going to be recognized. Big waste of time in a pandemic and an economic crisis. At the end, Joe Biden will be the next president.
Norm Eisen, thank you very much, especially in these wee hours, but you know, can't sleep on history. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break. There is a change in the state of play. We're hearing from John Ossoff. Is he about to help deliver the Senate majority to Democrats? We're also keeping a watch on DeKalb County. Now, what is this technical glitch? What does it mean? What's the state of play? We have news right after this. All right, we have a key race alert for you right now in the state of play in Georgia. Obviously, the Senate is up for grabs. We've just had a change in play. John Ossoff is now in the lead over incumbent David Perdue. 3,560 votes ahead. Statistically, it is a dead heat. But this is a fundamental change in the race. We'll talk about why in just a moment. The other race, we've already heard from Reverend Raphael Warnock, who came out and gave what apparently is a success speech. But it's not over yet. He is 40,575 votes ahead, however, over the incumbent who was put in place by the governor there. That race right now is at 1 percentage point, meaning it is clear of the 0.5 percentage point margin that you need to ask for a recount, okay? Now, very interesting. Just as we saw the change in the votes, we got a statement from John Ossoff, who said from his campaign that he believes that when all the votes are counted, we fully expect that John Ossoff will have won this election to represent Georgia in the United States Senate. We look forward to seeing the process through in the coming hours and moving ahead so John can start fighting for all Georgians in the U.S. Senate. Remember, if Ossoff wins and Warnock wins, that means you have a 50-50 tie in the Senate, and that means who breaks the tie? The Vice President of the United States. Who's that? Kamala Harris as of January 20th. So let's go to JB. JB, what did we see now in Ossoff's lead? 3,500 votes. Why?
We saw new votes from DeKalb County. This is the county we've been watching over the last several hours. Let's take a look right now. DeKalb County now with 94% reporting. You see John Ossoff now leads by 206,000 votes there. Now, I'm going to try to tell you exactly what just came in because I think it's instructive. Let's put up the blackboard here so people can see it. Hang on one sec. Okay, so we got roughly 6,000 new votes in from this county. David Perdue got 512 of them. John Ossoff got 5,394, okay? 91% of the vote, 9% for David Perdue. This shows why we've been saying for some time that as this remaining vote comes in from these Democratic counties like DeKalb and also maybe Fulton later on, that it breaks heavily toward the Democrats. This was only a smidgen of the vote we're expecting. We're expecting at least another 10,000, maybe more votes from DeKalb County. We were saying that might break 80-20. This one actually broke 91-9, so you can see how John Ossoff was able to expand his margin there.
So that's interesting. So again, it's a presumption because we're not calling the race or anywhere clear near it. But this type of margin, even if it goes back down, it is highly suggestive that the incumbent David Perdue has got a lot of wood to chop if he wants to get back in this.
He's got a problem, right? Let me see if I can get rid of this here and I can just pull out. Just so you know, 97% reporting across the state right now. Where's the vote remaining? I mean, this is where there's 7% or more remaining. It's in all these places.
What about all that red? Not enough population.
No, there's not a lot of people here. You look, there's 3,000 people in this county, in Jenkins County. Look up here. You look over here, for instance, in Madison County. Again, not a lot of people, and you're dealing with only a few thousand votes to spare here. So there aren't the votes that Perdue would want in order to make up these margins in DeKalb County, where there's still more than 10,000 votes to come in.
So we were talking about, as Don tells me, to hit the D, DeKalb. D as in Democrat because it's representing. We also have Nick Valencia, who is there now, and maybe can give us some information about what may become the narrative of anyone who loses tonight, which is, Nick, what you were telling us about officials there saying they had encountered some type of technical issue. What do we know?
That's right. Still work being done behind here, but the vote counts, the reporting from this county has really slowed down considerably, and we know why now. Technical issues, according to the county, has caused them to now have to manually scan 19,000 ballots. This is a statement that we just got here. I want to read this, Chris, to our audience. Due to technical issues, the remaining 19,000 ballots must be manually scanned in order to be tabulated and added to the final vote count. They go on to say that these outstanding paper ballots are currently being scanned and the tabulation will be completed as quickly as possible and in compliance with state guidelines. Look, guys, we're trying to get a timeline on exactly when we will see these these votes that we're waiting on. We've been waiting really for hours now. We've just got a quick update that John Berman talked about, but no timeline given by officials. We've heard anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours. That's an unofficial time, though. Officials not saying from the county exactly how long this will take, but now they're going to have to manually scan them because of these technical issues, Chris.
Any concern about the legitimacy of the votes that have been counted?
So far, we have not heard any problems, any issues here. The spokeswoman here that we've been speaking to has been very clear. Average wait times to vote, 6 minutes. They had no issues at all. No major issues to report. Of course, you're always going to have some minor things. We heard some minor reports in the morning, but nothing major or significant, Chris.
Bad news is adds time to the process. Good news is, after a machine check of a recount, what you ask for is a manual recount. Right. So they are slow walking this process because they have technical problems, but you are getting hands and eyes on things that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Look, as the Georgia election officials have told us all along, there's literally a paper trail in the voting there. They have the paper ballots so they can go back and then scan them if there's a glitch. This barely even registers as a glitch. The impressive thing to me is what? It's like 2 a.m. in the morning right now. They're still working. They're still working to get these votes counted and report them so people can see that this is a free and fair election.
Now, something we didn't get to in the depth that I wanted to earlier, because we had news coming in, that's good, is the headline of the night of how the black vote delivered in Georgia. And let's look at that in absolute context, but also versus Warnock and Ossoff, because we're seeing different performances there as well.
I will show you. Let me just compare where Warnock and Ossoff are right now. You can see that John Ossoff's leading by about 3,500 votes. Overall, Raphael Warnock leading by 40,000. Now, you may think that Warnock is just doing better in counties with African-American population, and he's doing a little bit better there. We don't really have a way to show you that here. But Kelly Loeffler is underperforming. David Perdue has been elected in Georgia before. Kelly Loeffler never has. So what you might be just seeing here is the advantage of incumbency that Perdue has over Loeffler. It may not be as much of a Warnock versus Ossoff thing, although Raphael Warnock is running very strong in the African-American community around Atlanta and also this stretch here. Let me show you one thing. I have to illustrate it with the Perdue let me see what I got here. No, they changed it on me, so I can't show you. Well, I can go like this. In this stretch of the state right here, this is known as the Black Belt. The Democratic candidates have vastly overperformed what they were showing before. They are doing very well there, and David Perdue is underperforming under Donald Trump. We'll take a look at this a little better, and I'll get some of the numbers so I can show you.
All right, so let's do that. Let's get into the break right now. Look, things are getting very tight, and the votes are coming in. This is the time to really focus in on what's going to happen in these. This is history in the making. Let's take a breath. We'll be right back. All right, we have breaking news. We can now make a projection in one of the two Georgia Senate runoffs. CNN will now project that Democrat Raphael Warnock is elected to the U.S. Senate. The pastor defeating Republican incumbent Kelly Loeffler. This puts Democrats halfway toward their goal of retaking control of the U.S. Senate. It now all comes down to who wins the other runoff. Jon Ossoff, who is currently in the lead, or incumbent Senator David Perdue. That is your headline. We are projecting that Raphael Warnock has been elected to the U.S. Senate. Now, the question becomes why and how and what does it mean for the other race? That takes us to John Berman. He came out early and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. I represent everybody. It wasn't premature.
No, he came out for good reason. He's now leading by 40,000 votes. There's more vote to be counted, which likely skews Democratic. Let's just talk about the historic nature of this, first of all. You have an African-American pastor being elected senator from an Old South state. That is historic in and of itself, and it puts now the Democrats one vote away from controlling the Senate. That Senate seat is still up for grabs at this point. How did Raphael Warnock do it? He ran ahead of Joe Biden. If Joe Biden's the baseline for Democrats, what you need to do to win in Georgia, Raphael Warnock ran better than Joe Biden in all these counties where there's color. He did it almost everywhere, okay? Particularly, for instance, in a lot of these African-American heavily populated counties here. Look at Bibb County, for instance. He got 62.8% of the vote. I can show you what Joe Biden did, 61.4%. Just that little bit of difference in all those places adds up. He was a strong candidate in those areas. He also benefited, frankly, from his opponent. Kelly Loeffler, not as popular as David Perdue. David Perdue, as we said, has actually been elected to the Senate. Kelly Loeffler was appointed by Brian Kemp, the governor there, had never won an election in Georgia, and that may have hurt her. You can see Raphael Warnock, also Fulton County. Let me just point this out. Raphael Warnock is a Reverend Ebenezer Baptist Church, Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Martin Luther King Sr.'s church. Deep roots in the area, deep roots among black churches, which are so important in Georgia as well. In Fulton County, you can see Raphael Warnock got 72.4% of the vote. Let me compare that, in this case, to David Perdue, to Jon Ossoff. You can see Raphael Warnock actually got 4,000 more votes in Fulton County than Jon Ossoff did. So you can see Raphael Warnock overperforming Joe Biden in some cases, and also Jon Ossoff, who was also running in this election. So a very strong candidacy for Warnock across the state. One other thing I want to point out, because it happened just yesterday, Donald Trump came to campaign against both Democratic senators. This is the county that he went to. Now you look at this and say, oh man, Raphael Warnock got shellacked in this county. He just got 29% of the vote. But it wasn't really a change from what happened in the presidential race there. You can see Joe Biden got 29%. So Donald Trump's visit to Whitfield County last night didn't seem to make a huge difference. It didn't necessarily animate Republicans in the numbers that they needed to turn out to overcome what Raphael Warnock was able to do.
You had a super motivated black vote in this state.
Absolutely.
That made a difference in the presidential race and now made a difference in the Senate. I mean, they literally put their hand on history tonight with Warnock, both for what he represents and how he won. I mean, there were a lot of questions about the black vote going into this election, about whether or not they'd come out, whether the Democrats still deserve them. Boy, did they represent.
They came out, and they came out early, which Harry could talk about more in a second if you want. They came out early. They overrepresented in the early vote from what they were projected to do, which is also which is a huge change. That's a huge change, Harry, from previous elections.
That's exactly right. It's a huge change. You go back to the 2008 runoff. Remember, that was a year in which Saxby Chambliss, the incumbent Republican, was forced into a runoff by Jim Martin, the Democrat. And you basically saw in that election black turnout dropping from the general election to the runoff and that year was held in December. That is clearly not the case this time around. You had large African-American turnout in that black belt running from Augusta down to the southwest portion of the state. But the other thing I'll point out is that Raphael Warnock also did particularly well in those suburban areas. Look at Gwinnett County, for example, where he's up by 21 points right now. That was a county that, if I recall correctly, Mitt Romney carried by 9 points back in 2012. So that's basically a 30-point shift. That just gives you an understanding that those Atlanta suburbs really, really were a big deal in this election, and switching them from Republicans to the Democrats, at least in Raphael Warnock's case.
So let me ask you this, Harry. I also want to bring in Mark Preston and Kirsten Powers. It's good to have you both. Thank you for joining us in this history-making moment. Once again, we're living it together. Harry, you say that the suburbs made a difference, but when you're looking about the headline of this in terms of why this happened tonight, how high on the register of impact are you going to have to put the black vote?
The top. The top. I mean, this was the big question mark heading into this, right? You saw that African Americans in the general election perhaps made up a lower share than they traditionally have. And there was a real question of whether or not black voters were going to turn out. But as John was hinting at, we saw in the early vote that black voters were making up a larger share than they did in the general election at the equivalent points. And although we don't have the exact numbers right now, we'll have to wait and see. At this particular point, if you're looking at where the vote totals were down the least relative to the November elections, it tended to be in those places where African Americans make up a significant either portion or even a majority of the electorate.
Kirsten, huge turnout tonight, not just among black voters, but, you know, that is most notable. But in a runoff election like this, you usually have big fall off from the general. And here, we're definitely over 4.6 million. You had 5 million in the state during the presidential race. You know, it's really strong turnout. How big a deal is this for the president-elect if both of these races go his party's way?
Oh, I mean, it's really hard to overstate what a big deal it would be if both of these races go his way in terms of governing. But I also think for the Democratic Party, even just with this one race called, it shows us that Biden winning Georgia wasn't an aberration. So it suggests that there is something more going on there, and this could become a state that Democrats could perhaps more, rely on more than they have been able to in the past, because it was always seen as trending in that direction. But now it suggests that maybe there's been some sort of shift, which I think, you know, we have to acknowledge the role that Stacey Abrams has played in this, particularly in terms of really changing how the black turnout has been, both for the president and president-elect and now in this race. So, you know, I think that there are a lot of implications about this for the Democratic Party, and then also, you know, for the president-elect, if he has if he's in control, basically, if Democrats are in control of, you know, all three parties. I mean, all three branches of government, that's going to radically change how he can govern.
Kirsten, if I can jump in, let me ask you a question, because this became about not the right to vote in Georgia, but the fight to vote in Georgia. I think Democrats made a strategic positive by turning this into when Republicans in Georgia tried to suppress the vote. So what Democrats did was made it about the fight to vote. They're trying to steal your vote. You have people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis who fought for your right to vote, people who died. And I think that Democrats were able to turn that message over and use the president and also Kelly Loeffler, some of her own words, against her. And that certainly appeared to help them in this race down in Georgia.
Yeah. Is that directed at me, Don?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that, you know, and Kelly Loeffler also, let's remember, made a lot of really, I don't know what the right word for, like low down kind of attacks on Reverend Warnock, you know, really trying to tie him to Jeremiah Wright, trying to, you know, play sort of these sort of, I don't know, racial politics around black churches, which we saw with Jeremiah Wright, and she was doing the same kind of thing with him. And it obviously didn't work for her. And then I think we also would be remiss if we didn't talk about Donald Trump's role in all of this, of course. You know, there was a lot of confusion, I think, sent by the Republican Party and by Donald Trump, telling people that you can't trust the vote, you know, so it was sending mixed messages about voting, and then also just creating general chaos around, you know, the check, the $2,000 checks, and then you had, Mitch McConnell denying that. So there just was a lot of chaos created. And then, of course, the infamous, phone call that has happened with, with Donald Trump, calling in the day before the election and basically trying to, strong arm an official into helping him steal an election. So he also played a role in this.
Absolutely. A failure has one father. It's going to be Donald Trump when this is reviewed. Now, the question, Mark Preston, is if this changes everything, does everything include today when Congress meets? Do you think that if these two races seem determined at that point, do you think it changes the calculus for the Retrumplicans in terms of their broadside on democracy?
No. Look, I think that if you have already stated that you are not supporting the certification, which will happen in just a few hours, and you're a Republican, you're going to stay that course. You have pretty much cast the die on that. But I do think long term, though, we are going to see some changes, not just in how things operate on Capitol Hill, but how things are operating in both of these political parties. Democrats should be extremely happy right now, Chris. It's amazing what they've done in Georgia. I'll show my age here. I spent many years down in Georgia as a newspaper reporter. I'll also show my age. I was there when the last 50-50 happened in the U.S. Senate. I was a beat reporter on Capitol Hill. It is extremely difficult to get anything done on Capitol Hill. And liberals who think that just because that they've got the Senate, or perhaps will have the Senate by a tie-breaking vote, doesn't mean they're going to get everything through, let alone much of anything through. It is still a very divided Washington.
And you have the filibuster.
And guess what? One of the most powerful people in Washington right now, which we haven't talked about, and there's going to be plenty of time to talk about him, is Joe Manchin, who's a very conservative Democrat, who is going to be somebody who is not going to be supportive of all of these liberal ideals. Once you lose Joe Manchin, you may lose some other senators. Kyrsten Sinema, who's from Arizona. She has shown herself to be a little bit more conservative. Mark Kelly, who's up in 2 years. And most specifically, as we talk about this race right now, and Raphael Warnock has made history, has done something we've never seen happen before in Georgia. But he has to run immediately again. He has to run again in 2 years. He was running against somebody who wasn't a politician. We have made that known. He will run against somebody in 2 years, guaranteed, who will be not only well-funded, but will be somebody who's been a veteran politician. It will be a much harder campaign, I think, in 2 years.
Mark, that's 2 years away. So, and you're right about that. And you and I are not old. We're just, we're aged like a fine wine.
We're gray.
But can we say, since you bring that up, right, he made history, think about it, all of us, and anyone can respond to this. Think about in the state of Georgia down south, if John Ossoff does pull this off, you will have a black man and a Jewish man who have been elected in the state of Georgia tonight. That is history. Discuss.
Well, let me say one thing about that, and I'll go back to my Georgia newspaper days. There's a famous case that goes back to the early 1900s where a Jewish man was hung in, I believe it was in between Atlanta and in Milledgeville. He was accused of a crime that he never committed, and it just showed you back then that people could get away with it. Prominent citizens hung this Jewish man who had run a pencil factory, became a big play on Broadway. Look where we are now, where, as you note, we have a Jewish man who very likely is going to represent Georgia, and his seatmate is going to be an African-American man. It is very, very historic.
Now, Harry, also in terms, so you have history, but you're also going to have practicality. Because if you have control of the Senate, the first thing that means for Biden is personnel. If he wants, let's say, Sally Yates as AG, you don't have control of the Senate. There's zero chance that happens. So he's got a much better chance of getting his AG. Also, $2,000 checks. Obviously, John Ossoff has been talking about being on board with that. I don't know what Joe Manchin wasn't against $2,000 checks. He just couldn't get people there. But, Harry, how big a deal is it for Biden's agenda and just checking off who he gets in positions of power and what his first two steps is legislatively?
It's huge. It's huge. They now control that. They can get bills to the floor. They can actually discuss them. He can get people into his cabinet. And, Stephen Breyer is not a particularly young man as a Supreme Court justice at this particular point. Now, if he, wanted to step aside in the next 2 years, they could have a majority where they could, in fact, appoint and confirm a United States Supreme Court justice. So while certainly there are some issues that you wouldn't be able to break the 60-vote barrier to break a filibuster, there are plenty of moves that now Joe Biden, if in fact John Ossoff does win that race, and obviously we have not called that one like we called Warnock, but if in fact John Ossoff is the next senator from the state of Georgia, this opens up a whole slew of avenues to Joe Biden and could make his presidency much more successful, at least give it the opportunity to be.
You know who else it's huge for, Don, is, and you guys check me on this in terms of whether or not she'll have as broad a mandate as I'm suspecting she will, is VP Kamala Harris. Because the way this works is if Ossoff wins and Warnock wins, then they have a 50-50 Senate. The tiebreaker is the vice president. The president of the Senate is the vice president. So Kamala Harris will loom very large in every legislative dispute. That's a platform we don't usually see a vice president having.
Yeah, potentially bigger than I think any vice president in modern history. I would think. Check me if I'm wrong. But a black woman, right, who is vice president of the United States, a former senator who will have the tie-breaking vote. I mean, that's huge.
Right? Kirsten, am I overstating it at all, or is she going to have a different kind of juice than we would have anticipated?
I guess so. I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, she's representing the president, so it's whatever the president wants, and so I don't think it's like she's deciding, what she's going to do. She'll be there representing the White House, but I do think that it does make a difference. It's true, things are still going to be, it's not like the Democrats are have 10 extra seats or something in the Senate. So, I mean, it still is going to be close, and it's still going to be, hard at times, but it's much better to have, if you're a Democrat, it's much better to have Chuck Schumer, be the majority leader. It's much better to have Democrats being the ranking members on the committees. And, that's where the power is really practiced. So it's not just on the votes. It's who gets to decide what's going to be brought onto the floor, for example.
True.
So, there are a lot of implications here.
But there will be moments that will be made, and Kamala Harris will wind up being the capstone on things that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. We'll be sitting here covering it in the middle of the night, as we always are.
And we'll be waiting on Kamala Harris. That's right.
Yes.
So anyway, let's take a quick break because we got wood to chop here, and more votes just came in, and we will take you through what's going on. Remember, CNN just projected Raphael Warnock defeats Senator Kelly Loeffler. What about the other race? We have news next.
Chopping wood.
Carrying water. This is a night where it is worth staying up because we are living history. We have major breaking news from the Georgia Senate runoffs that will help decide how much power a president, Joe Biden, has with his agenda in the first weeks in office. We just made a key race alert, and we gave you some new information, so let's show it again. Raphael Warnock, you see the check mark? We have predicted that he will have won the race against incumbent Kelly Loeffler. There are still votes to be counted, but his margin keeps growing, and the counties where there are outstanding votes fall heavily Democratic. So right there, you see a 46,551 vote lead. Warnock came out a couple hours ago suggesting that he had won. We have now predicted that that's the way it looks at this point. Georgia Senate runoff with John Ossoff. All eyes are on this race now. He is now 9,527 votes ahead. In the last hour, he went from being down 1,300 votes to up 9,527. That race is within the margin of recall. There are still votes coming out, and that's what just happened. We just had a little bit of a change in that race. So let's go to John Berman at the Magic Wall. What just happened that changed the Ossoff race?
All right, let me just show you. I circled the number here. John Ossoff, 9,500 votes ahead. This is approaching Joe Biden territory when he won by 11,000 votes. Where did the vote come from? It all came from DeKalb County, which is this county we've been watching very, very closely here. DeKalb County had a dump, and I'll pull this up, of about 6,600 votes. 6,600 votes in DeKalb County. This is how they broke. I'll start with the low number here. 333. 333 for David Perdue, and then 6,300 for Jon Ossoff. That's 95% to 5%. Again, we've been saying all night long that in DeKalb,
That's one of the worst fives I've ever seen. Will you make that a little bit better?
the handwriting's tough here. Phil Mattingly, by the way, has got impeccable handwriting. He couldn't be here tonight. He couldn't be here tonight, so you're stuck with me. But Jon Ossoff got 95% of the vote here in this recent dump. He's got 83% in DeKalb County in general, but this remaining vote is heavily Democratic, which is why he's now expanding his lead there. Harold.
John, look, those are African-American precincts. There's no doubt about it. And this just keeps getting at the last 2 months of politics that are some of the worst politics I've ever seen, where you had Kelly Loeffler basically attacking the black church in the state of Georgia. What are you doing? Oh, my goodness gracious.
Do you agree that that was a strategic blunder? I was talking to Kirsten about that. Who does that?
It's not someone who's not a particularly good politician. I mean, the Democrats won this race, the Democrats won the Warnock race, don't get me wrong, but Kelly Loeffler also lost that particular race. And that's why we're seeing not only these large margins, but we're seeing this large African-American turnout. And this, I think, gets at the larger point. Remember, even though Joe Biden won in the presidential race in Georgia back in November, the Senate Republican candidates actually ran ahead of the Senate Democratic candidates. There was some sort of switch that happened over the last 2 months where all of a sudden now the Senate Democratic candidates are running ahead of the Senate Republican candidates. Something went very, very wrong for Republicans and very right for Democrats.
Yeah, and the name is Donald Trump. What Loeffler was doing is a page right out of his book. You go to what's ugly, you go to what scare people, and you hope you keep them divided. Now, the problem in Georgia was it actually motivated people to come out as a rejection of Donald Trump. You see these candidates outperforming Joe Biden. Why? Because, as Harry is suggesting, John, it has to be the case.
You see right here, these are all the counties where Jon Ossoff outperformed Joe Biden. It's a lot of counties.
A lot of counties.
It's a lot of counties.
And it's not so much that, Biden bad, these guys are better. It's that in this period of assessment of these candidates in this time since the election, things have happened. Just that call with the Georgia Secretary of State is such an insult. What's going on with the Republicans, a broadside on democracy, that scares people who are worried about being disenfranchised already.
Can I tell you, in some of these areas where, by the way, Jon Ossoff outperformed Joe Biden, includes right here, which is where Donald Trump was last night. Right?
No, that's exactly right. And look, if you have Donald Trump attacking the voting mechanisms, the vote counting in Georgia back in November, well, what a surprise that perhaps a few extra Republicans might want to stay home because they don't believe in the legitimacy of the system, even though that's the way we elect our folks in this country. And perhaps they didn't turn out while African Americans who had to fight so hard for the right to vote in this country decided they were going to actually use that right, while a lot of white rural voters decided, no, I'm going to stay home because I don't necessarily believe in the system.
It was the fight to vote, as I said, not just the right to vote. It was the fight to vote, and that's how Democrats strategize and use it. That was the messaging. But there were, John and Chris and Harry, there were billboards down in Georgia that people were driving by in Republican strongholds saying, this is rigged. Don't vote. Vote against the people who are not standing up for the president. You're suppressing your own vote.
Don, I don't understand it, right? Like, all I do is I study elections for a living. And all of a sudden, when you have an election, two elections that are determining control of the United States Senate, and you need your folks to come out and vote in runoffs, which are often about turnout, and you give them reason to stay home, it's just piss-poor politics. And the results of that piss-poor politics we're seeing in the results this evening.
And hey, Chris, can I ask you a question?
Races.
Chris, you and John, because you both watched. We watched the president the other night go down to Georgia, and he had one job, and that was to turn out the vote for both the Republican candidates, both of them incumbents. Instead of starting off talking about the candidates, he talked about his grievances, how the election was stolen. How much do you think that hurt these folks tonight? One of them who is lost, the other one who's on the verge of.
I think he wound up falling into another song lyric. That is the devil coming down to Georgia. You come down to a state where people had to fight to have the franchise, and he is speaking in no coded language that he wants to change that back to him deciding who gets to vote. And if you needed any kind of confirmation of it as an echo, we just got a statement out of the Perdue campaign. All right? Do me a favor, Gillis, put it up there so we can read it. Because, again, it's the same line of messaging. Do we
want
have
me to read it for you? We will mobilize every available resource and exhaust every legal recourse to ensure all legally cast ballots are properly counted. We believe in the end
Senator Perdue will be victorious. And I have terror. I can't read.
Well, no, you read it. You read it perfectly.
I can't see. I need my glasses.
And the message is obvious a few words in. They have no reason to say that they believe they won. There is no substantial basis of anything that we have understood, of anything that has been reported by officials there, to give any credibility to the idea that the vote is wrong.
No, and let me just point out one other thing. Right now, John Ossoff leads by 0.2%. If he expands his lead past 0.5%, no recount. Below 0.5%, David Perdue can request a recount, but if it's more than 0.5%, it's done. You were talking about Donald Trump. What effect did his trip have? One thing I can tell you, it didn't help, right?
It did.
It did not help. It did not help David Perdue at all. This is Whitfield County. This is the county where Donald Trump was last night, right? Wasn't the election? I can't even remember when the election was. This was his final trip. He came in and spoke for 90 minutes here. You can see David Perdue got 22,000 votes in the county. What did Donald Trump get? He got 25,000 votes. So look, you know, might Perdue have received even fewer votes had Donald Trump not showed up? We don't know, but it certainly didn't boost the turnout in any substantial way.
It didn't help turnout in Georgia at all, John? Is that what you're saying? Or was it just in that county?
Overall, well, look, overall in a runoff, turnout is down. But it's hard to see that Donald Trump drove enormous numbers in the place where he visited most recently. Look, Donald Trump turns out voters. Yes. One of the things we had seen historically was Donald Trump turned out voters. And it may very well be without Donald Trump on the actual ballot that hurt these candidates. But
what is John? But let me ask you, what does that mean? You know, Donald Trump is not going away. Yes, he's not going to be president after January 20th, but he's not going away in terms of the media. He's going to keep being out there. And all of a sudden, if Donald Trump is no longer on the ballot to help Republicans out, but still Democrats can use the messages that he puts forth against Republicans, you've seen a divided Republican Party within the state of Georgia. You saw the results of that tonight. You're seeing that just across the entire country. I think this is good, just looking at the larger picture. It's something Republicans are really going to have to deal with, where you sort of have this Trump wing of the party pulling it in one direction and the more traditional Republicans pulling in another.
Look, and when are they going to have to deal with it? Starting in a few hours. I can't stress this enough, is that there is a moment of reckoning that's going to happen in the U.S. Capitol starting at 1 o'clock tomorrow when the electoral votes are counted out loud. I mean, that is the constitutional role that Congress plays. And you have these Republicans who are going to object. And I wonder if some of them might have a moment of soul searching and say, look, the wagon that we hitched ourselves to here, it ain't riding in the right direction. It's not riding in a winning direction. We just lost certainly one. Let me just put this up so people can see it. Well, hang on. Well, they just lost one Senate seat right now for sure in Georgia and on their way to losing 2 Senate seats in Georgia, and that's the wagon that they hitched themselves to.
Hey, Chris, real quickly, because I know you're going to get to the break, but I think that there's like 25 news cycles in a week here. Let's not forget, you're talking about the presence of the president going down to Georgia, but I think the real thing that really exposed this president and may have turned a lot of people off in Georgia, even his own supporters, was that phone call that we were talking about the other night, the desperation in that phone call and just being debunked, conspiracy theory after lie, after non-truth, by the Secretary of State, by the guy who handles the elections, and just by his own people. It is stunning. I don't think that helped those candidates down in Georgia.
Couldn't help, but you never know with Trump, because you know what? That's not the first phone call he's had like that. Probably wasn't the first one he had in this campaign. He said the same thing to the head of Ukraine before he would give him aid. You know, Trump voters have such deep-seated frustration that they have clung to him way past his due date. We'll see. I don't think it goes away, that effect, after he does. But we're going to go away for a second right now. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have more of breaking news, the developments in this campaign, this election, we believe has been decided. What happens with Ossoff and Perdue means everything. We have the latest information right after this.
So here's the breaking news at this hour. CNN projects Raphael Warnock defeats Senator Kelly Loeffler in the special runoff election down in Georgia. We're now waiting for the final results in the runoff race between Democrat John Ossoff and Republican David Perdue. So let's get a key race alert right now.
And if you look at the big board or look at the wall, you can see Jon Ossoff has pulled ahead of David Perdue by 9,527 votes. Still very close, but it is believed, again, we're not calling it, that Jon Ossoff, if he hangs on to this, and those votes come in tomorrow in the heavily Democratic counties in Georgia, that Jon Ossoff will be the winner. We shall see. There's a lot to talk about with Bakari Sellers, Scott Jennings, and S.C. Cupp. Welcome back, all of you. Okay, S.C., let's talk about this. We were talking about the strategy of the Republicans, including the president. What do you think of the strategy? Was it a smart move to get the president down there at the last minute, considering what had just happened days before and his state of mind and what he was tweeting about and trying to get done?
How Trump bungled this, let me count the ways. Look, Trump has never really understood the value of turnout. We saw that in 2018, the midterms, when he kept saying over and over again, none of these elections are as important as mine was, which was like the opposite of the goal of turnout. And so he, in this one, actually performed a hat trick of ineptitude. For one, for starters, he lost his own election, right, which automatically disadvantaged him as he would attempt to campaign on behalf of Loeffler and Perdue. For another, he didn't campaign on behalf of Loeffler and Perdue. He dragged them over to a national election to campaign for him, an outgoing president. And three, he kept telling voters that the elections weren't to be trusted and they were rigged, and so that also didn't drive turnout. So Trump so mismanaged this special election. I'm sure he's heartbroken about it. But for Senators Loeffler and Perdue, who might be out of jobs, and for Democrats who might now have control of the Senate, I think it's clear Trump is the main reason they have lost these elections, if in fact they do tonight.
Bakari Sellers, Democrats 1 seat away from Senate control. It could have a dramatic, major impact on the Biden presidency.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Joe Biden in Delaware and Kamala Harris, Kamala now becomes, one of the most consequential vice presidents we've had in the history of this country. And I don't say that lightly. I was joking. I sent her a note earlier tonight and said, you thought you were getting away from the Senate, and now you're going right back. And she's going to have that privilege and that honor of breaking a tie. But at the end of the day, this is going to push an agenda. This actually puts more pressure on the Biden administration. Like I said earlier, you got to go big. You have people who are counting on you to give them the relief, or at least show that you're fighting for the relief that they need, whether or not it's COVID from a public health perspective or economic perspective, or whether or not it's many of those issues that we have been clamoring for. Even when you think about Jacob Blake today and the lack of justice he received, you move back up to the forefront criminal justice reform. And after elections like this in Georgia, you know what the Georgia state legislature is going to do. So you think about things like voting rights. So all of these things come to the forefront. But tonight, I mean, even just with Raphael Warnock, I just think that the role that this history-making performance that he put on played, it has to mean something for the Democratic Party, meaning that they have to do something to ensure that there's a return on investment for black voters across the country. I think that's necessary and something that has to be done in the first 100 days.
Mm-hmm. Scott Jennings, let's talk more about the Biden presidency. When you talk about, each of you have been talking about things that are getting done. Maybe there will be some bipartisanship. Maybe. You talk about the $2,000 stimulus checks. That was, part of the strategy that didn't work out for Republicans this time. It's going to have major impact on, I believe, who he picks for some very key positions, including the Attorney General. This makes the path to getting all of the people he wants on his cabinet, it's easier, perhaps, to get them confirmed.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to confirm people with 50 votes plus the tiebreaker than it would have been with 48 or 49. So the most problematic nominees that have been announced so far are Becerra for HHS and Tandon for OMB. They obviously now probably will be confirmed, and whoever he picks for Attorney General will likely be confirmed, as long as none of the Democrats in the Senate object to it. So, yes, staffing the government now for Biden becomes a lot easier. Governing and trying to pass bills, I don't think is as easy as Bakari is making it out to be. And that's Biden's burden to try to manage expectations on his left flank and to try to get some Republicans to join him in passing some bills. I do think, honestly, there are going to be some areas of cooperation between the two parties. Infrastructure strikes me as one area. And then the other one, I think there's an emerging consensus, or at least a bipartisan working group on, is tech industry issues. It looks like some of Biden and his people and some of the Republicans seem to have some areas of agreement on the tech companies. So I actually do believe it's possible for some policy to be made between the 40-yard lines here. But the pressure on him from the left, I think, as Bakari has said, to go big is going to be huge. And his ability to manage that while Republicans are not obviously going to go for it in the Senate, I think is going to define this first two years of the Biden presidency.
And also, I think it's worth remembering that having control of Congress is not a magic bullet. Obama had control of Congress for the first 2 years. He got stimulus passed. He got health care passed. He didn't get immigration. He didn't close Gitmo. He didn't do gun control. He didn't do a lot of the things he had promised to do. Trump had control of Congress for the first 2 years of his administration. He got tax cuts. He got Brett Kavanaugh. You know what he didn't get? A wall. He didn't replace health care. Just having control doesn't mean everything else is aligned for you to get even your signature pieces of legislation over the goal line. So there are challenges ahead that will be from Biden's left, from the middle, and from the right.
Scott, take us inside the mind and the psyche of Republicans right now. What are you guys thinking?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on who you ask. I mean, look, the reality is it stinks to lose, and nobody likes to lose. The sunny side of me says we get to do it all again in 2 years, and then we get to do it all again in 2 years after that. To me, the biggest question for Republicans right now is, are we going to continue to devolve into a party that is consumed with the idea that we can overturn an election tomorrow, which is an asinine idea? It is pure madness, and it is going to be a stain on this presidency. Are we going to continue to go down that path, or are we going to use this as a learning experience? When you have a bad outcome in life, smart people, successful people use it as a learning experience. What do we need to do to get better in the future? And it is apparent that Donald Trump did some things that brought a few folks into the party, and that he also did some things that drove traditional Republicans away. We need both of them. The learning experience here is, how do we get those folks back that went away from us? What kind of candidates can do that? We have 2 straight national elections, where 3 really, if you count the 2018 midterm, where Donald Trump or Donald Trump-aligned party people couldn't get a majority or a plurality of the national vote. We may have squeezed all the blood out of this turnip that there is to squeeze. Okay. And it may be time to move on to other personalities who can do both.
I want to ask you, Bakari, and I have just a short time here. I don't mean to give you a short trip, but does that mean that they have to jettison Donald Trump in order to do what Scott just said? Is it time to move on, to break up?
Well, no, it's amazing to me that people thought when the new year came that all of a sudden things were going to change.
He's already making baseless claims about this election, by the way, but go on.
Yeah, that things were going to change, that like COVID was going to go away and life was going to be better on January 1st. And it also amazes me that people think that on January 20th at noon, Donald Trump's going to disappear. He's not. He's still going to be a looming figure. And even more, the cancer that is Trumpism is going to be around the Republican Party for a long period of time. It was fascinating to see in Georgia. One of the things we talked about was strategy earlier. The reason that you had this turnout the way it was is that one of the strategies they employed was attacking the black church. Yeah. Like, you can't do that in the South.
Bakari, you can't do it, especially when it is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. The guy is the pastor.
But Raphael Warnock had to thread an incredible needle because they tried to make him a radical Negro. That was the plan, and it didn't work. It backfired. So now you have a Morehouse alum going to the Senate. You have a Howard alum who's vice president and a Spelman sister who lifted him up. It's a great day in Georgia when you think about the context of history that we're in.
Yeah. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I'll see you soon. Democrats on the brink of flipping the Senate. One race down, one left on a night when everyone in America is watching Georgia. We're live all morning with the newest numbers for you.
All right, you just saw President Trump and President-elect Joe Biden both go down to Georgia to make a difference. For Biden, it means everything. It is history in terms of what he will have to deal with going forward. 4 years. But it's all about the beginning for him, especially in the middle of a crisis. If he has control of the Senate, it will mean everything. For Trump, it may be about nothing more than playing the spoiler, but now he's going to have to deal with a legacy of defeat. And he is the reason that this is not going the right way in Georgia to this point tonight. How is it going in Georgia? We have the numbers. Here is a key race alert. All right, this is the state of play. Raphael Warnock elected to the U.S. Senate. That is the projection from CNN at this hour. He came out a few hours ago saying what amounted to, I won, I'm going to serve everybody. Let's go and do the things that need to be done for the state of Georgia. You'll see there the key race now, because remember, Democrats don't need one, they need both, or it doesn't matter, and the Republicans stay in power. John Ossoff is now 9,527 votes ahead. Statistically, it's 50.1 to 49.9, which means if it stays under 0.5% or at 0.5% of a percentage point, the incumbent Senator David Perdue can ask for a recount. But there are still more votes to count. So we have breaking news right now in Georgia, but we cannot ignore what Donald Trump and his surrogates are about to attempt today in just a few hours in the United States Congress. Will these outcomes, if they stay this way, make a difference on the momentum of people attempting to broadside our democracy just as a play of fealty to this president? If he's blamed for these failures, might it change the state of play? Here is what we know it's not going to change. It can't change the outcome. The procedure just doesn't allow for it, given the numbers that we have. Even with the wall of shame we've been putting it up with all these Retrumplicans who are going to vote against certifying the electors, there just aren't enough. Okay? But you are about to see the ugliness of Washington, and really, let's be honest, the ugliness of where we are in this country on full display and in full force. It's not just about them. What's happening in Washington is reflective of this country. Yes, they are a grotesque example. Yes, the political culture has become perverse, but it's all an extension of what's going on in this country. Now, what will happen? There are signs that even VP Mike Pence understands the reality, because his role is largely ceremonial. It's ministerial. He's not going to change the outcome the way his buddy, President Trump, suggested he would to the entire country on live cameras. I don't know why Trump threw Pence under the bus like that. Let's discuss with CNN election law analyst Fernita Tolson. Thank you for joining us, especially at the hour. Do I have it right that while if you have a member of the House and a member of the Senate that want to debate and take a vote on a particular slate of electors, that can happen, but you got to have the numbers, right?
Yes. So, Chris, first, thank you for having me on. But let's be clear, that's part of the process, right? So the Electoral Count Act has a procedure in place for objections to be lodged to any particular slate of electors. So if a Republican member of the House and a Republican member of the Senate decide to submit a written objection, then each chamber will debate the objection for 2 hours. And then they decide whether or not to sustain it. Now, keep in mind that the control of the chambers is still split. And so it's unlikely that the objection will go anywhere. So really what we're seeing tomorrow is political theater. And I do think the outcome of the election tonight will probably decide how much of the political theater is extended, right? We may see debate over Arizona and maybe Georgia, but they may stop there if they feel like they've gotten what they need, right? This is also about fundraising. This is about placating the base. And so if they get what they need tomorrow, then we may see that'll determine how much of this is extended out into late in the night.
Mike Pence, the president putting it out there into the ether that he can make a difference. What is the reality legally?
He cannot. I know the president likes to say things, but the reality is that the vice president is usually a rubber stamp in this context. I mean, the 12th Amendment says that his job is to open the certificates. And even the Electoral Count Act is weighted towards making sure this is a streamlined process. If states submit slates that are certified by the date this year is December 8th, which all of the contested states have complied with, then Congress is supposed to treat those slates as presumptively valid. really there's no grounds for an objection. And if you think about it, Chris, all of the objections that have been made public in the sense of, for example, Senator Hawley coming out and saying that he's concerned about the Pennsylvania slate of electors and he's concerned about sort of these generalized allegations of fraud, these are things that have been litigated for the last 7 weeks. And so the only thing that has changed is the forum, right? They have brought these issues into Congress to be debated tomorrow, even though these issues have been resolved in courts of law over the last 7 weeks. And let's be frank, Black and brown people voting in Atlanta, Milwaukee, Detroit, Philadelphia, that is not an election of regularity, right? That's not voter fraud. That's the face of American democracy. And so if you want to compete for those votes, you need to come forward with some policies, not voter suppression.
And also, there's going to be a message sent by this rejection yesterday, this defiance. It's not just going after the vote, you're going after those who did vote. That will be remembered as well. And that's why I'm wondering if this result in Georgia may make a difference in some of the minds on this wall of shame here. And these people should be remembered. Why? Because as you picked out, Fernita, this is not something where people are going to come out tomorrow with tons of proof that motivate their objection. If they had the proof, they would have done it in a court of law. They tried, they lost dozens of times. In terms of the context of history and under the law, what do these faces and names represent to you?
As an American embarrassment, right, we have a process in place. And Chris, I am an election law scholar. I believe people should vote. And so far be it from me to paint the process as perfect. It's not. Georgia voters in particular had to overcome years of voter suppression. I know that we're holding the Secretary of State out for his bravery and dealing with President Trump, but it's also the reality that he has spent a number of years making it harder for people to vote in Georgia, right? So there are things that we need to work on in our process. And so to me, that makes it even more shameful that attention is being diverted on what in effect is a political stunt. This will amount to nothing tomorrow. Right. And people really need to understand and punish these folks for even putting the country through this.
So I understand the law. I understand how you lay it out. Now, people will look at what happened in the state of Pennsylvania today and say, wait, but look, they didn't seat that senator. What if this happens tomorrow? How do you contrast the two?
Well, I mean, tomorrow is different, right? Because tomorrow we have a process in place that's outlined in both the U.S. Constitution and in federal statutes to govern the process tomorrow. So I really think that people should just have faith in that, right? Don't look at anything that unfolds tomorrow as some sort of aberration in the process. Even if we criticize the wall of shame for lodging their objections, the reality is that there's a process for lodging objections. This is all part of the process. Even with the vote in Georgia tonight, right? So if Ossoff and Perdue stay within 0.5%, there's a process for a recount. That is not an aberration in our system. And so even when things don't go as cleanly as we would like them to, the reality is that the law has a procedure in place to govern these circumstances.
Well, and the flip side is just because you have a right doesn't mean that it's right to exercise it the way you want to. And them, so they have the right to object, but the way they're going to object is objectionable in and of itself. Fernita Tolson, thank you for making so much sense, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast. But we're living history, and it's nice to have you be part of it. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Take care.
Absolutely. So as we go to break, we know who won the presidency, but is Joe Biden about to have a huge roadblock lifted in terms of getting things done? This is the race. Ossoff versus Perdue. Okay, votes are coming in. What will happen? There's news on our watch. Next.